Hey, how you guys all doing today? We're doing a stream on Wednesday today. Sorry about yesterday. I have absolutely no excuses. For real. I literally fell asleep. And that's as simple as that. I was literally sitting here, just tooling around, fell asleep. No excuses. We're in the dead of January here. It's too quiet. It's too cold. I'm in hibernation mode. Kevin, good to see you. Eggs D, good to see you guys. We are just getting the show started today. Lots of fun things to talk about today. Austin, good to see you, Austin. Lots of fun stuff to talk about today. Yeah, sorry, Peanut Butter Beatrice. And I wish I had a better excuse. I do. I wish it was something more serious. I wish it was like, sorry, guys, I had a crisis that I had to rush to. Nope, the crisis was sleepy times. Just simple as that. Austin asks right out the gate, did I hear about the ceasefire in Gaza? I did. Look, there's lots of people who are discussing this from the angle of like, oh, finally some action, or Netanyahu is feeling this way, or this, that, or the other thing, or back and forth, and all this kind of stuff. And I think there's this great statement that I feel is actually really of note and interesting. Ceasefire agreement includes previous red lines for Israel. Israel has agreed to withdraw fully from Gaza, leaving no troops or security zone, including a full withdrawal from the Philadelphia corridor. Israel has agreed not to exile released prisoners, but to let them into Gaza again. Israel waived its demand for a list of live hostages. Israel agreed to allow residents to return to northern Gaza. Israel agreed to accept dead bodies in the first stage. Israel has no provisions to replace Hamas. Hamas will continue to rule Gaza. It's impossible to deny that this is a victory for the Palestinian resistance. And this is all if you actually believe that Israel is genuine, which I don't. I don't. I don't see any reason for anyone to believe a single thing that Israel has to say on any subject, especially like, yeah, a ceasefire. That's a serious thing that we're definitely going to do. Like, we're talking about a military that opens fire on unarmed medics, that keeps food away from starving children. Like, we're talking about Nazis here. Like, it seems as though everybody has kind of forgotten who we're actually talking about and what we're actually dealing with. That my feeling is that this is just a political ploy, that they'll break this ceasefire the moment they feel it's politically expedient for them to do so. Not politically expedient, just useful for them to do so. Like, I think that there are people who are going to perceive this as a victory. I don't. Like, I don't. Like, it's just, I think that they are maneuvering for their own interests and nothing else. Like, they've stirred up so much trouble. Israel has stirred up so much trouble on its northern border with Iran, with Yemen. Like, Yemen was shooting hypersonic missiles into Israel a few days ago, right? Obviously, Israel is feeling the pressure from its neighbors and is feeling the pressure internally with its, like, really, when you look at like a war map, it's surrounded. Right, it's surrounded by Palestinians and Hamas on the one side, and then the West Bank is right there as well, and then it's also dealing now with the Lebanese, the Yemenis, the Iranians, the clusterfuck that must be Syria, right? Like, it's impossible to pretend as though what they did in Syria is just like, yeah, Bob's your uncle. That's just a cleaned up, doop doop doop, everything's completely fine, right? Like, obviously, there's going to be huge resistance groups and forces all throughout Syria. Syria's been this ridiculous quagmire for like a decade and a half. Like, it's just been this ridiculous situation the whole time. And the idea that Israel's just going to pop in there. Just pop in and out, right? Just a 20-minute adventure. Come on, Morty. Let's go. 20-minute adventure. Just in and out. Pop in and out, right? Yeah, right. So I feel like this is probably a sign that Israel has lost its momentum. It's looking for a way out, or it's looking for its maneuvering itself. But everybody should understand pretty clearly that this is just Nazis negotiating, right? Like, the minute, like the millisecond they feel like they can get any benefit whatsoever, they will absolutely break this ceasefire because they're completely untrustworthy. You can't believe a single thing they have to say. It's like, eventually, right? Like, it'll bite back. And I don't think that we should believe them for a moment. But if it does give even a moment's respite to the Palestinians who are experiencing the most egregious genocide of the century, sure, like, great, right? You guys know me. I'm not going to be happy until Netanyahu is, behind bars and or dead. And of course, I found there's this meme that's circulating, right? Because anyone who doesn't want to genocide children must be Hamas, right? Like these Nazis are so pathetic. And I feel like this is going to be the theme of today's stream, is how pathetic everything is and how massive, how enormous, like, our leaders are enormous losers. Like, they're enormous losers. It's unbelievable the scale and scope to which these people are incompetent, moronic losers, gallivanting around pretending like they're winners while they achieve less than nothing. That's basically the theme, and people are really beginning to understand that, I think, with the TikTok ban, right? The TikTok ban has so obviously blown up in these people's faces. Like, the Israel lobby wants TikTok to be banned because TikTok was the method by which, and all of these social media apps really, but TikTok was the big one. It's the one that received the final blame. It was the method by which people actually discovered what was going on in Gaza and what was going on in Israel, and where people really came to recognize and realize that the statement of defense was itself indefensible. Like, oh, we have to go in and cleanse Gaza as a statement of defense. It's like, what are you talking about? Like, absolutely not. And it's how people stay connected to, like, the ICC rulings. It's how people stay connected to and how other voices began to penetrate through. And so the Israel lobbied to get it banned, and it looks like that ban is actually going to go through on Sunday. But what did people do? What are people on TikTok doing? They're migrating to a new app. And of course, people like Mark Zuckerberg, the dim-witted, floppy-haired moron that he is, was like, oh, they'll come over to Meta. They'll join Facebook. Well, you know where they all went? They went to a Chinese app, an even more Chinese app. TikTok was owned by a Singaporean company. So now they're migrating over to a Chinese app called Red Note, so named after, in reference to Mao's Little Red Book. So all of these social, and the proof is the fact that Red Note suddenly becomes one of the most downloaded apps on the App Store. All of the sudden. And you've got Jimmy Fallon commenting on it. You've got all kinds of voices commenting on this migration. And what is this but a massive FU to the power structure? What is this but a massive FU to Congress and the Senate and the presidency? The people of America literally just saying, oh, you're concerned that we're going to be giving our data to China? Well, then let me just give my data to China directly. And the commentary has been wonderful to watch. It's been I've been paying attention to it on both sides because I also downloaded Red Note. And the people over on Red Note are like, let's teach these people Chinese. Let's immediately start teaching them Chinese. Ni hao. Shushu. And yeah, Red Note is just Chinese TikTok. It's the exact same thing, right? They have slightly different rules. So you're going to get like less e-girls. Sorry, everybody. You're going to get less e-girls over on Chinese TikTok, over on Red Note. I know. I was disappointed too. And of course, Henry Trudeau is bringing up interesting points here, right? People will still use TikTok through VPN. So how effective will the ban be in the first place? And then also, America will ban it too, right? Like, that's a big concern. Is this TikTok ban just the beginning of the bans? Is it just the beginning? Like, are you going to see more bans of Chinese companies? How deep is it going to go? Is it going to become a crime to play League of Legends? Right? Are they going to ban like Tencent, which owns Riot? So if you play a game of League of Legends, are you gonna be exiled to China? Are you gonna be banned? New CIA drone pilot over on Twitch. Good to see you. Palestinians are celebrating. Yeah, can't restock, make preparations. The Israelis were unable to rescue the hostages or defeat Hamas. Massive Israel L. Yeah, I mean, I'll acknowledge that the fact that the Israelis have to negotiate in this way, it does show that they've kind of been browbeaten into a position, right? They can't continue forward with this, like, we're going to win. And it's just become obvious, like, no, you won't. Like, you straight up won't. Like, you've got the Yemenis shooting hypersonic rockets at you. Like, you're not going to win. Like, and if they continue this way, like, they are going to lose. And I hope they lose. Just like I hope the Nazis lose. Right? Right? Like, it's not a good situation for anybody. Henry asks, is this ceasefire really the end of the conflict? I don't think so. Like, it's just another step. It is an acknowledgement that the Israelis have gotten themselves into a position where they need to negotiate something, right? They can't just continue forward. And the fact that they're basically conceding everything shows you that they've gotten themselves into a very weak position, right? And they have gotten themselves into a weak position. Like, their economy is decimated. Their economy has declined like 40 to 50% at this point. Like, it's huge, massive decline. Their citizens are constantly in a state where they need to be prepared for evacuation at any moment, because if it's not Iran lobbing missiles at them, it's the Yemenis lobbing missiles at them. They keep making enemies everywhere they go, right? The Lebanese hate them, the Jordanians hate them, the Iranians hate them. The Yemenis obviously hate them, and the people who are actually willing to negotiate with them, which is the Saudis, right, are now no longer willing to do so. Right? They're no longer willing to do so because Israel has really revealed itself to be a Nazi state, and the people of Saudi Arabia are not willing to negotiate. They are not going to allow their leaders to normalize relations between Israel and Saudi Arabia. And what this has all led to, and this is where it becomes a disaster of like geopolitical proportions, just like an enormous, massive it's a disaster for America. The Chinese, during all of this, stepped in and said, hey, Iran, hey, Saudi Arabia, you guys have historically butt heads with one another. Wouldn't it be in both of your best interests if you actually joined forces and actually normalized relations with each other. And Saudi Arabia took them up on it. Saudi Arabia took them up on it. Saudi Arabia looked at Iran and said, yeah, you know what? If we joined forces, like, it's like you're playing this game of Survivor, right? And you had these two people who were kind of at odds with one another, and they had their like little cult or their little tribes or their little followings, and they were like biting at each other and like trying to get all this shit. And then one of them went over to the other one and was like, wait a minute, hold on, time out. If we join forces, we can own the game. And if they do it, and if they stick it out, they can own the game. Like, Iran and Saudi Arabia together control the Middle East. Like, they are the dominant party in that region. Together, they can have hegemonic strength with one another, right? And the question is, will they be able to maintain it? But with China backing the whole agreement and looking at them saying, hey, if you guys can just stop fighting each other, you could stop being antagonistic with each other, then you can join this like larger trade network that we are setting up, and everybody can just get rich. Don't you want everybody to get rich? It's a total disaster for Israel. It's a total disaster for America, who literally has spent in the last 2 decades like $6 trillion specifically to destabilize this whole region in order to ensure that such an agreement between the Iranians and the Saudi Arabians would never occur. And it's all blown up. It's all blown to pieces. It's all totaled. Like, what game do they actually have at this point? I don't have this up in front of me right now, but if you go to Trump's Truth Social, Trump very recently polled his own base and basically asked them, what country is the biggest threat to America right now? Right? And of course it was like Russia, China, other. Right? And Russia was like a little, and China was like a little more, and then the vast majority was other. And when you looked in the comments, all of his people were saying Israel, dude. Like, Israel's the biggest threat to America right now. By a lot. Right? And to Trump's credit, he didn't take the poll down. Right? So people are beginning to realize and recognize and understand, like, this is not a good deal. This is not a good deal for the people of America. This is not a good deal for people. Like, if it's all about America first, well, then what are we doing here? Why are we blowing everything up for this like military base that's clearly in retrograde and is failing? JT, good to see you. Anemone, always a pleasure. Henry says it will all depend on how much Trump is willing to aid or cut once for all. I mean, that's going to be the truth, isn't it? Like, this is the big question when it comes to Trump. Like, what's he actually going to do? Right? You can't believe a word he says. That's always been the problem with all of these American politicians, but Trump is sort of emblematic of it. You don't know what his plan is. He just has concepts of a plan, right? You don't know what his ideas are. He's just going to say things to you in order to get your support. Well, now he doesn't need to do that. And so what is he actually going to do? We don't know. Like, we don't know what he's actually going to do. Eggs D. Yes, and this is a big thing with the red note switch. This is really what I noticed with all of these people switching over from TikTok to red note. Decades upon decades of propaganda about how China is so unfree and no free speech is literally collapsing in front of our eyes. Yeah, and all it really took is a bunch of Americans to just talk to the Chinese. To just have discussions with the Chinese, just to be like, wait, how much rent are you paying? Like, how much food can you get? Like, what's the situation? Like, and the whole thing is just, it's collapsing in front of our eyes. And it's so very obvious and very clear that the power structure never anticipated that this could be even possible. Like, they never even considered for a moment that, oh yeah, they'll all switch over to a Chinese, to like a more Chinese app. An app that doesn't even, like, it's all in Chinese. Like, the joke is like the people of America are more willing to learn Chinese than they are to go over to Meta. Dutch says, I got a plan, John. Let's hear it, Dutch. Let's hear it. Fire away. And Hull asks, should I actually download Red Note? Yeah, it's great. It is actually great. Like, the people over there are really good. There's a lot of people who are on TikTok who have switched over to Red Note. Just because there's a lot of people, like, the most brutal part about all of this is that Red Note, people are making a living off TikTok, right? God bless them. But, like, and the saddest thing over the last couple of weeks is seeing people, creators, actually, like, saying goodbye to people and actually being like, I've got this app's going to get shut down, and, like, thank you for the journey, and I've been making my living off this, and now it's like this whole thing has shaken up my whole life. Guys, I really, really hate to do this, and I promise that I took my dog down, but he's, like, really, really scratching at the door. He probably has to go poop. I'm so sorry. I have to take him down. Stick around for a minute. Sorry, guys. Milo, dude, I definitely took you down, dude. Like, why are you scratching at the door? Do you need to go down? Yeah, you do. Yeah, you do. Hey, remember when I took you down? Remember when that happened? Yeah. Remember how that happened? How I took you down? Okay. Okay, sorry about that, guys. Oh, sorry about that, guys. Say hello to little Milo. Oh, you take him down like 20 minutes before I have to live stream, and then of course he's like, I have to go. A relieved Milo. I don't know if he's ever relieved. He's always sort of a anxious little guy. Anemone says, I like your shirt. Well, Anemone. Well, thank you. I wore it just for you. Just so that we could have this moment together, you and me. Let me catch my breath. Oh, goodness. Ugh. Be over on Twitch. Good to see you. Never forget, brother. Never forget, brother. Who does Trump care about the most? Trump. That's all. Never Forget Brother says, if you know who Trump cares about the most, you'll know what he'll do. Really? Oh man, you should let us in. You should have let us in on that, because Trump cares about Trump. That's what Trump cares about. He doesn't care about anything else. And I have heard some people saying that Donald Trump is starting to talk about like his legacy, right? He's starting to talk about like how people are going to perceive him in the future, and that he wants to leave his mark and make his mark on American culture, right? But the trouble is that his perception, and I feel like the TikTok ban is exactly the right analogy to use, right? The perception of the rich, the perception of the wealthy, the perception of what they think matters and how people are going to respond and how people are going to react is wildly out of step with what the vast majority of people are experiencing, and what the vast and what reality is going to do. Like, I'm not going to say that they should have expected that everyone was going to go over to a Chinese app to Red Note. Like, that was surprising, right? But they should have understood that people aren't just going to go, well, I guess TikTok's getting banned. Well, over to Instagram. Like, these people are making notoriously bad predictions. And it's because they are out of step with reality. They live in a fantasy land. And and that's how I feel about Trump, right? Like, even if Trump sits there and says, I want to leave my mark, I want to have a good legacy, right? I want people, what are people going to think about when they think about the Trump years, right? How are people going to talk about it? Well, his perception of what is a good thing to do for America is limited exclusively to his own experiences, and he has no interest whatsoever in understanding or listening to the experiences of the average citizen outside of a marketing strategy. So, if he actually even does anything, is it going to have this positive impact? Is it going to be a good thing for us? Probably not, right? He's probably going to make things a lot easier for his rich friends to acquire more property and to expand their own business portfolios, because that's the whole philosophy, isn't it? Right? It'll all trickle down. Yeah, if we give all of the wealth and all of the power and all of the money to 5 people, then all the benefits will trickle down into us, and it'll all be wonderful and all be great. Simply Steve writes, I think it's funny how people are talking about a 2028 election in America. There's not going to be an election in 28 or ever again in this country. We have presidents for life now, and the days of people voting our leaders are over in America. Yeah, we'll see. Right? Like, this to me is the big problem with what is going on in American politics, and a big problem with American politics generally. There's no such thing as accountability, that people can just say what they like. And so when you have and their actions don't need to meet up with their rhetoric. And that's always been somewhat true in American politics, right? A politician would say, well, my goal is to do this, and then they'll never meet that goal. But Trump literally just is like like lying, just outright, blatantly, in the most outlandish possible ways. And so the problem with this is that it engenders a ton of instability. because you don't know what what his plan is to do, right? Like stable leaders and people who are in stable leadership understand that you say what you're going to do and then you do the thing you said you were going to do. And if you do that consistently, that engenders a great deal of stability. And that people can disagree with the thing that you are saying and doing. They can disagree with that, but they'll still prefer that. They'll prefer the direction you're going, even if they disagree with it, as long as it's being laid out stably, compared to this just like fracas, uncertain, what's tomorrow even going to bring? And on top of that, what makes it even worse is that we have a news media that is incompetent. That's really the only word to use. It's just nakedly incompetent. Even if they wanted to do good journalism, they wouldn't know how, because they've trained themselves out of it. They're just propagandists. They're just stenographers for power. And so now here you have a whole bunch of propagandists who are actually looking at the circumstances and being like, oh, fuck, like, we cannot propagandize our way out of this. And this is why you end up like Rachel Maddow gets caught in a pattern of just like Democrats, 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 while the entire society is like, no, dude, the Democrats and the Republicans are in on this together. Like, they don't know how to respond. They don't know what to do. And they don't know where to begin, right? They don't know how to actually penetrate into the conversation because they're too stupid. They've trained themselves into incompetence. And like when you have somebody like Trump and you're supposed to have journalists, right? You really want them to be saying, okay, this is what Trump said. This is what he did. January 15th, 2025. Here's what Trump did today. This is what Trump did today. This is what Trump did today. This is what he said he was going to do, and this is what he did. And that's what you want them to be doing, and they're not doing it. Right? They're not doing it. They're just falling into the old patterns of sensationalization, editorializing, and they're not telling you what's actually happening. It's just sensationalism and entertainment, which is why they're irrelevant, and we all know they're irrelevant. It's why you guys are here. Right? It's why people listen to podcasters instead of like multi-billion-dollar corporations. Because, and it isn't even that we don't trust them because we think they're propagandists. Like, I don't listen to these people because I think that they are stupid. Like, they're not capable of intelligent thought. That I trust a person talking on the street more than I trust Anderson Cooper. Because I think Anderson Cooper is a moron, and he can't help it. He's trained himself to be that way. Henry writes, Stalin ordered Trotsky. I don't want to talk about Trotsky anymore. No, people bringing up Trotsky, I'm done with it, right? Like, look, if you're part of a Trotsky organization, you're part of a little cult. That's it. These people are cultists. I'm over it. Like, I'm over it. Like straight up, these Trotsky cultists will give you an article that says, like, oh, the Indonesian people were destroyed because they followed the wrong ideology. It's like, you don't think it has anything to do with the American military? Oh, no, it's your kooky cult, and they didn't follow the right cult, and that's the reason they were destroyed? Oh, okay, cool. So, no more Trotsky talk. I'm done with it. Like, you can have, like, a historical discussion if you like, but that's not what these people are doing. Right? They're weird little kooky cultists following a weird little kooky cult. And if you're part of a Trotsky cult, get out of the Trotsky cult. Abandon ship. It's a cult. Abandon ship. If you're not allowed to use material historical dialectics on the figure of your party, it's a cult. Abandon ship. Get out. Yeah, unfortunately, XD. Like, unfortunate. Like, I'm done with these Trotskyists. Straight up. Like, it's the reason why their analysis often just aligns with the CIA, right? Because they have like this cult and they're easy to manipulate because they're a cult. Like, they're not actually using a historical material dialectic, right? They're funneling everything into an ideology, and that ideology comes from where? JT writes, I get a third term because one was stolen from me. Dutch writes, why would Trump get rid of American democracy when the system is working for him just fine? Yeah, I mean, that's more or less my feeling, Dutch. Like, uh, he's not, like, Trump isn't an ideologue, right? He doesn't have an ideology. He has empowered those that do, right? And that makes him very threatening, right? And that makes him very threatening. But, like, he himself, like, he's not standing there being like, American democracy is holding back that. Like, he's literally just like, how do I game this for my own best interest? And he'll tell you that's what he's doing. He did tell you that's what he was doing. He said it explicitly with in his debates against Hillary Clinton. And people liked him for it. People liked that he said that shit. Nilo writes, I like this turn away from Trotsky from you, John. Me too. Yeah, I guess that's why I couldn't stand Fight Back. Fight Back felt like a cult. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, like, I tried to organize with these guys, and I tried to give them the benefit of the doubt. And I tried to, like, be like, okay, you know, they show up, they're doing the work. But you know what? At the end of the day, they're just a fucking book club. Like, they're just a fucking book club. Like, they're not actually interested in actually pursuing anything that actually matters. They're not actually going to do anything at the end of the day. Right? And they're too much of a pain in the ass to deal with. Like, that's the real truth. And at the end of the day, if you don't kowtow to their religious ideology surrounding their little cult leader, who is Trotsky, well, then they're going to toss you out anyway. Right? So it's either bend the knee, right, to this little cult, this little cultish idea that they have. And it is a cult. Like, you read any of their writing and you're just like the thing that finally tipped it over for me, right? The thing that finally, like, I had a conversation with one of their leaders, right? And we were talking about Trotsky, and I was, like, giving my genuine opinion about, like, who Trotsky is and who he, and what he was, and the historical sort of analysis that I have of Trotsky and the confrontation I have with Stalin. And she ended up giving me some literature to read that comes out of the organization. And I'm like, okay, cool, I'll read this, right? And straight up the literature is like, oh, because the Indonesians, right? I hadn't read that much about the Indonesian communists, right? So I was interested. But the whole thrust of the piece is that because the Indonesian communists weren't following Trotsky, essentially, the ideology of Trotsky, that's the reason why they were defeated. I'm like, probably not. Like, it probably had more to do with the overwhelming force of the American military, right? Like, you genuinely think that the Indonesian communists are going to successfully defeat the American military, especially as the American military is, like, destroying the Vietnamese communists, confronting and containing the Chinese communists. You think the Indonesian communists they're the ones that are going to do it? What are you talking about? And it's just, it comes down to my final fundamental critique of these organizations, which is that they're not actually using a material historical analysis on themselves and their own leadership and their own figures, right? They've elevated them outside of that. They've become a cult. And so I'm pretty much done with it, because I'm not going to join a cult. And especially because at the end of the day, I don't think these guys are actually serious. I think they have a book club. Like, I don't think that they're that interested in doing anything to seize power in any kind of meaningful way. And that likely what will happen is when a serious organization comes up, and it'll be like a people's organization, right? It'll just be like a bunch of people who come together and say, fuck this, and we're going to do something about it, and they're going to go do something about it. Well, these Trotskyists are just going to stand in the corner and be like, that's not the way you're supposed to do it. And they'll like get in the way. Like that's what's going to happen. They're just going to get away. Like they're just going to get in the way of everything. Because they're just going to stand there and be like, that's not the way you're supposed to do it, according to our cult leader. Who gives a shit? Like, get the fuck out of here. Incidentally, your cult leader lost. Like, that's the big thing, dude. Like, their guy lost. Like, what are you talking about? They're standing there being like, you didn't do it the right way. You got to do it the way that we say that you got to do. Your guy lost. Like, your guy lost. He's the loser. Like, I don't give a fuck. I don't give a fuck about your loser ideology that leads to you losing. Like, that's what's crazy. Like if Trotsky had have won and he was the leader of Russia and there was this whole like movement within Russia towards Trotsky and then there were these Trotskyists over here, I'd be like, okay, let's really take this seriously. But their whole pitch, the whole thing that they have to say is that our guy lost and it was because the guy that beat us cheated. It's like, no, he didn't. He just beat you. He defeated you. You got your ass kicked. You lost. Why do I give a shit what you have to say? Like, that's the thing that kills me, dude. Like, there's absolutely no humility with these people. They're like, our guy was the guy that did all the right thing. He lost. He fundamentally lost. And why did he lose? Because he was unpopular. Because he's just like an unpopular figure. Right? Certainly passionate, certainly well written, certainly intelligent, but an asshole that nobody liked. Like, this isn't difficult to figure out. And my expectation when it comes to these trots is that they're going to get themselves into positions where people initially feel like they're useful because they're passionate and they show up and they're there. And then eventually people are just going to be like, can we get rid of this guy? Can we just get rid of this fucking asshole that's constantly standing in the way of everything we want to do, talking about dumb bullshit all the fucking time? Right? And like these guys talk about their fucking permanent, constantly with the permanent revolution, just over and over and over again. I'm like, yeah, dude, we tried that. We did. It was actually tried with the largest amount of force that it could have been tried in China. They tried it as hard as they possibly could. It lasted a full decade. 10 years of permanent revolution. It was called the Cultural Revolution. They did it for a decade. And you know what the result was? The Chinese people hated it. They fucking hated it. And why did they hate it? Because it was incredibly disruptive. It was incredibly disruptive to the development of their country. It was incredibly disruptive to the day-to-day living of their country. It empowered just insane acts and crazy bullshit. On the daily, people just constantly dealing with this churning cultural revolution, permanent revolution. Can it be over? And after a decade of dealing with that, do you know what the Chinese people did in response to the death of Mao? They brought back the people Mao purged from the Communist Party. They arrested his wife and her cohorts, the Gang of Four, put them on trial for what they called crimes that happened throughout that era of time. And then you know what they did? They did socialism in one country. That's what they did. And look where they are now. Look where they are now. But if you say any of this to a Trotskyist, it's just like brain off, cult leader under attack, defend the cult. So there's my Trotsky rant, dude. Like I'm no longer giving these people the benefit of the doubt. It's over for me. Like it's just like the victim blaming of the Indonesians was the end of it for me. It was the straw that broke the camel's back. I was like, you genuinely are trying to tell me right now that the thing that defeated the Indonesians was not the overwhelming might of the American military and the CIA and like big gigantic global conflagration, right? No, the thing that defeated them is that they weren't Trotskyists. Right. Okay, cool. This is a cult. Goodbye. Jeff writes, I only went to one meeting when I brought up direct action against an arms factory in Brampton. They said no. Yeah, no, they're book club. That's all they are. They're just a book club. Right? Their whole thing is that they just kind of want to be there. Right? They just kind of want to be there. They want to have their newspaper, right? Because Lenin had a newspaper, right? They don't want to actually like go anywhere and do anything. Because that's how the revolution happened in Russia, right? Just a bunch of people doing nothing. Jeff writes, I felt like they were more concerned about how to get my money than anything else. Yeah, not just Trots, but some MLs too. I mean, they do need, like, yeah, it's just, anyway, I think I'm done with that. Therein lies the whole Trotsky section, and I don't want to talk about Trotsky ever again, because I just am like in a historical perspective, sure, interesting, but like this whole like Trotsky versus Stalin, like you read their literature, and especially when they get talking about China, it's just embarrassing. It's just embarrassing. They literally call the Chinese communists Stalinists. It's just embarrassing. You're just like, oh boy, like how Eurocentric can you get? Like how full of yourselves can you get? Yeah, because Mao and Deng and like these figures, they didn't play. They didn't matter. No, it was Stalin. Stalin was the one directing everything. It's like, what are you fucking talking about? Like Stalin and Mao had like a working relationship at best. Like it's like a relationship based on convenience. It's like they weren't buddies. They weren't friends. Simply Steve, good to see you. How long before we could actually be charged with a crime for trash talking about Trump? No, this is the thing about these fascists, right? Like they don't really care if you trash talk, because at the end of the day, they're the ones with the guns. Like and I've said that all the time. It's the reason why they're always banging on about free speech, because it's like, yeah, say what you like, right? We're in charge. Like, say what you like. And like, will it get to the point where like actual criticism will get people rounded up and like writing like an essay? We'll see. Right, we'll see. But like, again, I just circle right back onto like, we don't know what's coming next. We don't know what's happening next. Dragon Fruit, good to see you. Good evening. Just so everyone knows, APAC is 100% behind this TikTok ban for sure. They were pissed that we got to see the atrocities in Gaza. Yeah, I'm sure you've already touched on that today. Oh yeah, of course. And we've been talking about the switch over to Red Note. Jeff writes, I don't mind giving money if I'm seeing results, but to send people on trips to conventions is not where I want my money going. Yeah, like, why? You would think that a group like that would be more interested in like community outreach and would be more interested in like really talking to people about what's going on in their day-to-day lives and like how we can move into the system in order to be more effective in the regular day-to-day lives with people. But I just think that they're not really that interested in that. I mean, it all makes sense. Like the reason, like fundamentally, the reason why I think Trotsky gets rejected by the Politburo, like that's. I know I just said I was going to stop talking about Trotsky, but it's just like, look, they talk about it as if there was an armed insurrection against Trotsky. It literally was a vote. They literally all got together and had a vote and were just like, yep, we're going to go not with you, Trotsky. We're going to go with Stalin. Right? And why? Because Stalin was the one that was working with them. And like the Trotskyists will literally mock Stalin for this. Stalin wasn't involved in the front line. Yeah, he was in administration. That's what he was doing. He was doing the grunt work. You understand? Right? And so he was a worker. He was just a working class guy working at the working class level, working with working class people, trying to organize at the working class level. And so while you're banging on about this revolution that you're never going to actually do, like you don't own a gun, you don't have a gun, you're not actually going to do it, you're diminishing and mocking the very working class people who you claim to represent. Right? And so why do they push Trotsky out at the end of the day? Because Trotsky is talking this way. Trotsky is like in this big, grand, sweeping narrative of permanent revolution and the force and all this. And all the working people are just like, that sounds a pain in the ass, dude. It sounds like a huge pain in the ass. I don't want to do that. Right? I want my life to get better. Anyway. Dutch van der Leyen. Hilarious name, by the way, bud. Mao Zedong had won control of the Chinese Communist Party against the opposition of a Moscow-trained leadership. It seems Stalin never seriously considered the Chinese Communists, as led by Mao, after the Long March, to be more than armed peasants interested in land distribution, a party with the wrong leadership, methods, and objectives, nor did he seem particularly dedicated to their struggle. Eager for stable relations with nationalist China, Stalin urged the CCP to suspend revolutionary activity in 1927, and again in 1936 when he sought an alliance with Chiang against Japan, and again in 1945 at a time when Mao already had control of an area containing 90 million Chinese. A few months before Mao's total victory, Stalin finally opened Soviet consulates in communist-held territory, but still maintained diplomatic relations with the Kuomintang. Soviet aid to Mao throughout the Civil War had been almost non-existent. Michael Parenti, The Anti-Communist Impulse, 1969. What a great series of quotes. This is what I'm talking about. Like, they're so into their ideology. Like, they're so wrapped up in their own little bubble of thought that, like, it just kind of reaches a point where it's like, what are you talking about? Like, what are you talking about? No, and I don't really blame Stalin. Like, that's the other part of it. Like, again, I'm not a fundamentalist. Like, I don't think that Stalin was a god, right? Like, I'm not a cultist. I'm not a cult leader. I'm not trying to build a cult. Like, it makes sense. Russia is a huge place. And China is like sure, it shares a border, but it's far away. Like, Russia's concerns are itself. And if I'm Stalin, I'm sitting there being like, okay, like, good luck, but like, I don't know if what you're doing is the right idea or the right thought, right? And then finally, when things emerge and become successful for the communists, Stalin was like, oh, okay, cool. Like, cool, it all worked out. Great. But the idea that, like, China and Stalin are, like, inextricably connected to one another in a way that is completely, like, literally Mao bending the knee to Stalin so that he can be called a Stalinist. It's embarrassing. It's just an embarrassing position to hold. Ugh. Jeff writes, setting up mutual aid, helping in the community is what I'm more interested in. Yeah, like, and that's what I was sort of interested in as well. That's what I sort of thought this group was going to be doing. Why else would they exist? Unless they're a cult, right? Like, why else would an organization like this exist? And initially I sort of thought to myself, okay, this is like a solidarity group. Like, I can kind of get behind a solidarity group. That's good. And, like, the idea of, like, we are going to be here and we'll be like a light post in the fog so that when things get difficult, people will be able to find us and we'll be here. But it's just like, It just kind of became obvious. It's just like a fucking. That's not going to go anywhere. It's just a dead end. Zed, good to see you. You talk about the Has interview with Dugan or Bernie and Hassanabi. No, I didn't even know about this, so I might check that out. Like, it is interesting to me that this Has figure is gaining as much like notoriety and support as he is. You know what I mean? Like, he seems to be coming out of nowhere. And like, you listen to the guy and he's just kind of like incomprehensible, and he's like supporting Nazis. Like, I don't really get like why is this guy suddenly being propelled up as fast as he is and talking to people like Bernie Sanders and Hassan and Dugan? Like, what the hell? Austin writes, do you have any organizations in Canada you would recommend? Yeah, dude, I think it's just a wasteland. Like, I'd join them. I would. But, like, it just looks like a complete and total, it just seems like a complete and total wasteland. Like, there's a reason why our leadership is as shitty as it is. Like, and the Red Scare period worked. Like, simple as that. Like, it worked. And, like, there are reasonable voices to listen to. Like, I would say that Richard Wolff is a really good voice to listen to. Oh, I always forget this guy's name. Shoot. There's a Marxist professor. His name starts with a D. It's like Danny or Denny or something like that. I always blank on his name. He seems really prescient. He seems really good. But, like, it just seems to me like the communist and socialist movements that exist in Canada now really just exist to fight amongst each other and to be book clubs. And I've also found some that I like am straight up convinced are just the feds, that are just like they don't tell you who their leaders are, right? Their platform sounds revolutionary, but when you actually like dig into it, it's like, oh, your whole thing is just electoralism. Like, this is just a dead end. And so Jeff writes, they want to make Hassan the new mainstream on Twitch. They see his reach, so they gave him access to Bernie, but never challenged him. Yeah, they want to funnel people into the Democratic Party, right? And, like, the transition for Hassan, like, Hassan has still maintained, like, his sort of background of communist and Marxist-Leninist thought, but he's rich now, right? And you can see it. Like, you can see the way he discusses issues, and you can see, like, anytime I tune into this guy, I'm just like, oh yeah, old Hassan would have never talked this way. You're just talking that way because you're comfortable and you're rich, right? And your interests are no longer the interests of the everyday working person. And, like, I do think that he tries to keep things in line, but it's like a disease, right? It's like a virus. You can't. You eventually just get detached from the frustration and the actual lived reality of what people are actually going through, and the resentment that people have. And so I think at the end of the day, like, Hassan's going to be like 60 or 70 or whatever, and like all the old guard will have died off or retired, and the Democratic Party will be like, well, who do we even have? And they'll be like, well, it's Hassan, I guess. And Hassan's job will just be to funnel people into this dead end system, right? Should it still exist. Nilo writes, has the ability to calm down and say intellectual stuff, but most of the time he just acts like a bigot. They think they lack jouissance. Hull says, you remind me of Vosh very much. Yeah, I'm not a pedophile, though. So, and I don't call people tankies. Like, I'm an actual communist, right? Like, I don't... I use a historical material dialectic. I like to read and research. Right, I actually like to know what I'm talking about, right? And let me make sure that everybody understands. I'm not a pedophile. That helps. New CIA drone pilot says Has came from Maupin's community. Yep, Caleb Maupin, and like, I've listened to Dugan several times, and Dugan has had like conversations with people who I actually like. Was it Michael Hudson? Who did he have a conversation with? No, it was John Mearsheimer. John Mearsheimer actually had. It wasn't a conversation with Dugan. It was like the host, and then Dugan was there, and so was John Mearsheimer, and they were like talking about the events. And I don't know what people are actually getting out of Dugan. Like, I don't really understand why people think he's profound or interesting. He seems very detached and like out in the middle of left field, you know? And like Haz is like this too, you know? You if you live in this kind of like abstract space, right? And you're never actually grounded, and you know a lot about like the history of events and things like this, but you're not actually rooting it in people's day-to-day lives, then you can sort of sound intelligent and sort of connect things. But it's all this just abstraction. And in many ways, I think Dugan is just sort of like another Peterson kind of figure, right? He found he found a theory of thought or an idea of thought and a collection of ideas, and he just sort of weaves stories and within that kind of context, but it doesn't make any fucking sense, right? And that's Dugan. I'm just like, every time I listen to the guy, I'm just like, and it's and the responses that people have to that are the same that they have for Peterson. Oh, you just haven't read enough. You just need to read more of his winding bullshit nonsense, and it'll all crystallize and it'll all make sense. But at the end of the day, like Peterson, I just think Dugan is good at manipulating people's emotions, right? That it's not about actually being correct or right in a factual way. It's or even discovering what's actually going on. It's just about manipulating people's basic emotions, right? And like there's like a kind of a truth weaving within that, but like it's not actually interested in solving any problems. Right? It's not actually interested in discovering what is real. It's just it's just manipulating people's emotions so that they'll look at you and they'll be like, wow, this guy's really something. Like, I take a look at Dugan and I'm like, he's not too much different than just like a pretty good slam poet, right? He's just sort of like preaching and people are like, oh yeah, I do feel that way. Yeah, Vosh is such a loser. Yeah, he's a pretty massive loser, dude. Like, he was an FBI snitch during the Occupy movement. It's like disgusting, frankly. Straight up confessed to it. It's just unbelievable. Jason of Thessalonica. I mean, the last thing I'll say about the Vosh thing is like, yes, I too indeed also have a beard and glasses. That's true. I don't have a ponytail though, because I'm an adult. Jason of Thessalonica. Helping in the community is great. It's a start, but ultimately it is not a solution. It doesn't get to the root cause of any societal issue, and most likely is detrimental to the well-being of Earth. But it's about building trust with your community. Like, that's the whole point. That's the whole idea, is to go out there and to be seen, to have it understood that, oh, here's a guy who's actually involved in the community and is trying to do something to help, to whatever degree that you can. Like, one of the things that I do like that the Trots actually do is they have that newspaper. They always have a newspaper. But my feeling is, like, they're charging for the newspaper, and I'm like, they should just be handing that newspaper out. Like, they should be. They should just be handing that shit out. But, like all cults, they're trying to make money for the leadership, right? Dutch says, the difference between him and Vosh is that John's opinions are correct. Well, they're rooted in facts. Like, Vosh is basically just a DNC hack, right? Like, he's there to try to demonize communism and demonize anything to the left of the DNC, and then also to funnel people into the DNC. That's his whole job. He's a massive, massive, massive loser. Like, I don't really get why people like him or listen to him. Like, he was big during the, like, debate bro period that was serious for like a couple of years, but I took one look at and was just like, yeah, that's stupid. Like it's just a bunch of stupid people cosplaying as if they're smart. And like Destiny is still around, Stephen Bonnell, even though he's just like another weird little cult leader who is just as illiterate and stupid as it gets. My favorite thing about Bonnell is that he's really good at finding like the two sentences that sound reasonable, but when you listen to him in any long form, like in any long form capacity, you're like, oh, this guy's stupid, and he is. He's a deeply stupid person. Henry writes, why are immigrants, I assume that you meant leaving Canada to America. America has lots of opportunity and purchase power. It's amazing how much America has grown in the decade. It's a place where you live. You know it'll be better 10 years later. I want to be an American and live there. I mean, literally, I'm reading a book right now about the coming Civil War. Like, I think you're living in a fairy tale. Like, I think you're living in a fantasy land. That if you were to talk to maybe 1 in 10 Americans, they might go along with that idea, because that would be like the wealthy class, like the bourgeois class that has sort of disconnected from the day-to-day living with America. But like, you see the obvious rise of fascism that's happening in America, right? At the very absolute rise of fascism in America. Like, I listened to a speech that was given in the Congress 2 days ago, the Texas Congress, where the guy was just laying it out that, yep, we've got a couple of billionaires here in Texas that are taking over our system. They've bought the governor, they've bought the Senate, they're buying the courts, and now they're trying to buy us. Are we going to let them? And like, it's just this naked rise of fascism. Like the current president of the United States is literally like a casino guy. Like, and his big backer is Elon Musk. Like, it's just like, I just don't know what, I just feel like you're buying into the propaganda. Like, and you're not actually taking a look at what's going on in the streets. You're not actually taking a look at like the spike of homelessness. Like, homelessness has gone up like 20% in the last year. The fentanyl crisis, the income inequality crisis. For God's sakes, like, LA just burnt down, like, right in front of you. Like, while they're defunding the fire department so that they can fund the bloated police department budgets. Like, it's just getting egregious. And the country's straight up banning media systems. Like, it's getting pretty wild. Jason writes, absolutely. For someone that considers himself somewhat of an intellectual, look at us here, waxing and waning about various political issues and forms of governments only gets you so far. Yeah, I think that's true. Like, there comes a point where you have to organize locally and you have to get out and you have to do something, right? And you have to find the people who are trying to, like, this has always been my criticism of what I'm doing in this channel here. And that's the reason why this channel has become something of just like a mental health. Like, this is where I dump my mental health. And I think that's why people come here, is so that we can all find a catharsis with one another. Right? We know that the thing is falling over. Like, we know. Like, the empire is crumbling. The global system is coming apart. There is a new world order coming, and America is not going to be on top of it. And the leadership of our countries are doing everything they can to spread mass misery into the society and basically say to everybody, you're on your own. Right? They basically explicitly say that. And so the immiseration that's going to occur, and that is occurring, which we can see, I think people feel isolated, and they, especially with the systems of propaganda that exist in the society. Right? If you air this kind of things with your friends and family, you often just get stonewalled, right? You often just get told, well, buck up, right? It's all the Peterson shit, right? Just buck up, do it yourself. Stop complaining so much, right? You're just lazy, this, that, and the other thing. And I think people understand that none of that is true, right? People feel like they're working hard, and people feel like they're not making any headway. And so they find someone like me, and I feel like it becomes a catharsis place. But my critique of this place and my caution to people is that this is not the end, right? This is the beginning. This is the launch off. This is you understanding that there are people that think like you do and speak like you do. And especially now, like, I think the TikTok ban is a big radicalization moment. I'm seeing way more and more people who are just openly talking the way that I'm talking. And that the criticism is that we're too spread out, that if all of us were living in the same town, we could get together and do some damage, right? We could actually get together and do something serious. But we don't. We're all across Canada and the United States, right? And that makes it difficult. And so the best that this could ever be is a solidarity movement and a place for people to come and be like, okay, I don't feel so crazy anymore. I don't feel so isolated anymore. There are people in the world who actually are like, yeah, things are coming apart at the seams. And I mean, I was saying that 10 years ago, things are coming apart at the seams, right? Like, it was just like pulling apart. And people would say to me, oh, John, you're being hyperbolic, and oh, you're crazy, and all that. Then Donald Trump gets elected. And suddenly those very same people are just like, hey, John, what do you think about that? What do you think? And it's like, okay, cool. Like, it's happening. It's all coming apart at the seams. And now people are seeing it. And it's getting more obvious, and it'll get more obvious, and it'll get more obvious, it'll get more obvious. Until finally, even like the most hard-nosed, like literally it'll just come down to, are you a fascist or not? That the fascists will always be like, yeah, just work harder. Life is about work and suffering. Just pick up a gun and shoot a Jew. Like, that's what's going to happen. Right? Where the rest of us are just going to be like, oh, fuck, yeah, this thing fell apart. Why did that happen? How did that happen? What are the circumstances? And, like, I especially see it with, like, young kids. Like, kids that are, like, 20. Like, they get out of school and they look around. They work in the workforce for, like, six months to a year. And they're just like, this is a shithole, dude. This is just terrible. Like, it's just awful. Henry Trudeau asks, how many people are actually homeless in America? Too many, dude. 0.02%. Oof. JT says, sounds like a game show. Win a ticket to a better country. Yeah. I don't think Henry is living in reality. Like, I think Henry is living in an imagination world. Dutch says, lots of young people, they all want to go to Norway or Sweden or some other Nordic country. Sure. Because, like, the weave has been woven, right? Henry says, I have to come to America and work as an illegal. Yeah, like, Hall says, work harder, but not efficiently or sustainably. Yeah, I mean, like, what is this? Like, of course your owners want you to continue working hard for nothing, right? Like, if they could get you to work for free, they would. Like, what do you think this whole H1, or what is it, the visa thing that they were talking about? Like, Elon Musk and the MAGA cult. They went at each other because Elon Musk was like, no, we need these visas and all this. And it, like, really highlighted and showed pretty clearly that, like, these people want to exploit cheap labor. For God's sakes, during the California wildfires, they're just using prison inmates, right? Because they don't want to pay people. They're not interested in paying anybody. They're not interested in spreading around any of this wealth. They're not interested in helping anybody. They're not interested in any of that. Yeah, and I mean, Dutch has a point. The reason why so many immigrants are flooding into America is because the CIA completely destroyed Latin America, and living there is unsafe. Yeah. And right now you have an interesting moment where President Maduro calls for a socialist cultural revolution. Like, I'll just play the video quick. A powerful cultural revolution. Venezuela, Latin America, and the Caribbean. and the world need a powerful cultural revolution that reclaims the best of human values and stands in opposition to the values of anti-values of Western decadence and fascism. A cultural revolution that clearly establishes the foundations of a new modernity. From Venezuela, we proclaim a new socialist modernity. And of course, what gets published very shortly thereafter, depose Maduro. Yeah, big from I believe that's the Atlantic. It looks like the Atlantic. Brett Stevens, big shocker there. Jason says, yes, absolutely. As far as I see, people are very entrenched in their belief systems, and it's ultimately, from my experience, time-consuming, focusing solely on affecting change politically. Yeah, look, Jason, my position is that it is too late for the West. We are going to experience large economic and social collapses. The building is falling over, right? It's getting closer to the ground. There was a period of time where it was like this, and then it was like this. Right now, it's literally like this. Like, it's straight up, like, Donald Trump is straight up saying he's going to shut down the Department of Education. Like, who knows what they're going to do, right? So they're just outright gutting out anything that makes a civilization, right? Like shutting down the Department of Education is basically just saying pack it in. Like, and I've said this about Canada, where I'm from, hence the Canadian flag. I've said this about Canada for years now, which is like, we were founded by a fur trading corporation and a queen. Well, the queen is dead, and the fur trading company is bankrupt. Like, what is this then? Like, what is this? And when you have a situation where you've got the president of the United States saying, hey, Canada and America should merge, and you've got like premiers talking about how that's a good idea, we should do that. Like, it's a period of turmoil for sure. And so the purpose for us is not to change people's minds, because what's going to change people's minds is the system of capital itself. That we don't need to spend any energy whatsoever changing people's minds, because I think you're right. People are entrenched in their belief systems, but you'd be surprised what hunger does to people. Like, you'd be surprised what watching people starve does to people. Like, I feel like even 5 years ago, if somebody had said to me, hey, some kid just shot a CEO in the streets, and a health insurance executive, like, I think most people would have been like, oh, goodness me, dearie me. That the outcome wouldn't have been, haha, fuck that guy, which is what it was. But everybody's had an experience now with the insurance companies. Everybody knows that these are demonic industries that shouldn't exist in the first place. And so when people see people like Brian Thompson getting gunned down, they're like, yep, that's right. At bare minimum, they're like that. It's the very, very tiniest of minorities that are standing there being like, oh, good, he was a father. Right? Most people are like, yeah, I get it. I don't condone it, but I get it. And then, of course, there's another fairly substantial section of people that are like, fuck yeah, let's kill that guy. Let's go. That's a sign of a society that is collapsing, and it's a sign of people's opinions changing based on material conditions. And so it's not up to us to change anybody's mind. It's up to us to be lighthouses in the fog. It's up to us to be there, shining a light into the fog for people to find, so that when the system of capital betrays them, as it does, because that's its natural state, they can look around and they can find light in the fog. and hopefully find some stability or some catharsis or something of merit and value. Lenin writes, every time a leader, whether they be left-wing or right-wing, who doesn't want to sell their people out to a foreign businessman comes to power in Latin America, they are attacked. I mean, the fact that Venezuela is saying, like the fact that Maduro is saying what he's saying kind of shows you that he's feeling stable. And I've been saying this for a little while about Maduro and the Venezuelans. Like, I don't think America's going to get in there. I don't think they're going to overthrow Venezuela. I don't think they are going to attack Venezuela, right? Like, Venezuela isn't some rinky-dinky, and like the Chavistas are not like some rinky-dinky, like, this is a highly well-organized military who has experienced America and their attacks before. They know how to defend themselves. And again, I keep saying it, like, I think that America is largely now just a paper tiger. That they had a moment post-World War II, right? They had a moment where they actually had real military men doing real military action, acting in a way that could be described as militarily, right? But very steadily over time, that group of people faded out, and the American military shifted over to intelligence agencies and mercenary groups, right? Private contractors, if you like, and arms dealers, essentially, like Lockheed Martin and all of these guys. And so they established a bunch of bases, they use a bunch of intelligence services, and they primarily do so by arming Nazis and far-right radicals in countries. They overthrow governments using intelligence assets. But now we're in a period of time where what America really needs in order to achieve its objectives is 1 million men. That's what they need. Like, sure, they can have all this equipment, and sure, they can have all this bureaucracy, and sure, they can have all of this stuff, and they do have all this stuff, and sure, they can spend all this money on mercenaries, and sure, they can spend all this money on like Lockheed Martin and private contractors, and sure, they can have all of this intelligence apparatus and these big propaganda systems and all of this kind of stuff, but at the end of the day, there are some problems that if you want to solve it, you need 1 million men. You just need to take 1 million men and put them into a meat grinder and just go, and that's how you win. And that's the case in Venezuela, because Venezuela it sees through the propaganda systems. It's over, right? Like, it's over. They're not going to be swayed by the system of propaganda that's coming out of America. They're not going to fall for intelligence. No mercenary group is going to launch any successful attack on them, because mercenaries are cowards by definition. They fight for money. That's the only thing they're interested in. And they're not going to risk their lives for you. They don't give a fuck about you. Even if you are the president of the United States, they don't care. And so how are they going to get in there? How are they going to do anything? And this is what I think is empowering Maduro finally. Like, he's seeing what's going on in the Middle East. He's seeing that Yemen is defeating Israel and that the Americans can't really do anything about it. Like, the failure of Operation, what was that? Prosperity Guardian, I think was the name of it. Right? The failure of that operation, I think, has had profound, resounding effects throughout the structure. I think every single country looked at that failure and was like, oh, they can't defeat the Yemenis. They're not going to defeat us. And you see, like, they're pivoting over to Southeast Asia and they're trying to confront China. Well, Venezuela's sitting there being like, oh, okay, cool. We should have a cultural revolution. We should have a big, gigantic moment. And Venezuela has been doing things. Like, it's been challenging the borders of Venezuela in court. It's been trying to slice off a piece of its neighboring country, Guyana, legally. Not through invasion, just through negotiation. So this is America is in this major, major decline. And I think that that's what's really empowering uh, uh, Maduro in Venezuela. Jason continues, not just time consuming, but ultimately a waste. Yes, it most certainly is. Cultural differences tend to create division, sort of the way the rainbow flag had the opposite effect of its intended use. I think that that's true internationally, right? Like that, the big red flag for the LGBTQ community should have been once the Democratic Party adopted it. It was just like, oh, okay, like these guys, these psychopaths are going to use us as a moralizing tool in order to try to get us into war, right? Oh, look at that culture. It needs more liberation, right? They're not like us. Let's go bomb them and take their oil, of course, but we're going to bomb them. But I don't think it is a waste, just because I think it's important to let people know you exist. I think it's important. Like, I think it's important that this channel exists. And I think it's important that there are voices in the conversation that people can go, what's this guy saying? Huh? And even if they come in here and they're just like, well, that sounds like kooky nonsense. Well, maybe in 5 years that won't be the case, right? Because in 5 years' time, they'll have actually experienced a real capitalist collapse. Henry writes, Trump will secure the border and drugs coming from Canada. He will cut the givings of money to foreign wars. Trump knows China is taking over America in the world. It's not good for democracy and humanity. I do think that Trump has a perspective of foreign politics that is detached from rather global politics, that is detached from Cold War thinking. That I do think that the Democrats have been really mired in like a Cold War perspective, whereas Trump's perspective of global politics is not mired in the Cold War, because I don't think Trump knows anything about the Cold War. So Trump is really just a he's fundamentally an opportunist, and he sees opportunity wherever he looks at it, and he doesn't care about the history. He really is just like, I'm looking at a country, there's the snapshot of the country, I talked to the leader, this is what we said, we made this deal, it sounded like a good deal, okay, off we go. And he doesn't care what happened 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. He doesn't give a shit. And he doesn't care what the intelligence agencies have been doing. This is why when he went to North Korea, like the entire intelligence apparatus was just like, he's doing what? He went to North Korea and he like shook Kim. I always forget. It's always Kim Il Sung or Kim Il Young or Kim Il Young. I always botch it. But he shook the leader's hand. He's like, good people over there, good people, good. And like the entire intelligence apparatus is like, we've been working our asses off to propagandize against these people. They're in like a Cold War standoff with one another. Don't you get that? Don't you get that, Trump? That North and South Korea are in like a standoff with one another, like a constant like Mexican standoff. But no, Trump doesn't know that. And if he did know that, he doesn't give a fuck. Right? Like, so that's what I'm talking about when I say that he's a wild card. Nobody knows what to expect from him, because I don't think that he kind of knows what to expect. But he doesn't actually know what he's doing, and he doesn't actually have any ideas or thoughts that are deep at all. Like, it really is just like making it up as he goes along. Yeah, the U.S. can't win a war against China. And I've been seeing some commentary saying that, like, it's over, right? Like, America cannot successfully challenge China any longer. And if you ask me, the biggest issue that America has when it comes to China is that China has a very strong standing army. Like, you can take a look at videos of Xi Jinping, like, walking down and seeing, like, 100,000 men standing at attention. And, like, they're all doing the marches, and they're all doing that kind of stuff. You know, the kind of stuff we used to see during World War II. But America doesn't have that kind of shit anymore. Like, The people who are involved in the military are essentially bureaucrats, right? They don't have like a standing army force that they can throw into a region. Like, that's not a real thing anymore in America. They can't conscript anybody. People aren't joining the military because I think more and more people are seeing more and more that this is a Nazi force. And so I think America's biggest problem isn't actually the technology edge that China is gaining, and China is gaining a technology edge, but it's just that there are more people involved in the process in China, and more people that are serious about it. Like, as I said earlier, right? If you have 1 million men that are willing to like go to a place and do a job, you're going to have a lot more success. I just got to say here, Jason, I don't think I really appreciate the way you're handling yourself. You're not a regular in here. I haven't seen you here before, I don't think. And I know that you're putting forward a challenging perspective, but I really appreciate that you're doing so with a so wait, you're just being polite. You are just being polite, because sometimes these conversations can get really heated and they can be really like difficult. So I just want to pause for a moment and just say thank you for your polite candor. Isaac, good to see you. Yes, I didn't know. I missed yesterday because I fell asleep. Isaac, I'm so sorry. That's the truth. That's the truth. It's embarrassing to say, but that's the truth. I fell asleep. Jason says the algorithm brought me here. Well, all hail the algorithm. Like, share, subscribe. Do hit those bells and those whistles. And Jason continues, culture from a Canadian perspective, no offense, has really dumbed down the populace and been weaponized for decades. Ouch, Jay. I just gave you a compliment. I just paid you a compliment, sir. It's very easy to placate various groups when you perceive them as demographics. I definitely hear what you're saying, that like the system of propaganda, both in the United States and Canada, is effective. It's the reason why they propagandize us, and they propagandize us starting from a very, very young age, right? It's. I think more and more people are starting to see through it. It's becoming more and more apparent and more obvious, especially as the systems of propaganda are not delivering on their outcomes. Like, it did used to be the case that if you went through and got a high school education and then went and got a university education, you would get a fucking job and you would be well positioned in your society, because the education system was developed to create factory workers. And then the university system was designed to create managers of those factories, right? Like that's the system as it stood. But the period of neoliberalism, where all the factories were shipped over overseas, well, now you have a bunch of people that are going through a school system, and they're coming out the other side, and then they're going to work at McDonald's. And it's like, what the fuck was that about? And so you have more people turning and looking at the system of propaganda that they were just jammed through, going, this was all just bullshit, wasn't it? Because guess what? It was. It absolutely was just a bullshit system that we were all traumatized with, that we all just collectively experienced, because capitalists were in control and they wanted factory workers who were compliant. And they didn't want you thinking about life in a different way. And they didn't want you to imagine life somehow detached from the system of capital. They wanted you to assume to your core that capitalism is true. And so they created a system that rewards only obedience. And then after you're obedient, maybe they care about intelligence to a certain degree. Jason says, it's difficult to chat in this format, not something I'm familiar with, so I do hope information doesn't get lost in translation. I understand that comment, Jason. I prefer it this way, and it's for extremely selfish reasons. Extremely selfish reasons. I despise debate broism. I despise it to my core. I refuse to engage in it. I don't want to do it. I'm willing to have somebody on and like interview them, right? But I'd prefer if people pose questions and then just let me go off on a tangent. Because at the end of the day, this is for me. I'm glad that you guys are here, and I'm glad that you're listening for sure, and I'm glad that you guys are getting anything out of it for sure. And I have nothing but love in my heart for each and every one of you that are here. But I swear to God, if I was doing debate bro stuff, I wouldn't do it. I just wouldn't do it. It's so pointless. It's so empty. It's so vapid. It's just the stupidest way to communicate. Because it like, the worst part about getting into like debate bro stuff is when you actually get talking about something and you get to it and you're just about to get to that point and then they interrupt you. Shut the fuck up. Like, I hate that shit so much. It's so annoying. You're like right there and you're just about to stick your landing. Right? And they do it on purpose because they know you're just about to stick your landing and they know they don't want to deal with that. And so they've got to like interrupt the flow so that instead of it being this long like thump that they have to kind of deliver with, they can break it all up and then you'll say your point, which will get lost. Your point will get lost, and then they'll talk about whatever they wanted to talk about. And you end up just kind of talking past each other, and it's annoying. So I decided a long time ago this is the way I'm going to do it, and I'm going to stick to it. Yeah, Nilo, I went to school for 18 years or whatever, come out with 0 skills for the workforce. Yeah, and that's on purpose. They don't want you to know anything. Scrail, good to see you, Scrail. I hope you're doing well out there, Scrail. Debate broism is heuristics and sophistry, not dialectics. Well, that would be, like, to me, that would be very interesting, right? If two people were coming together, and rather than it being like this confrontation of thought, where you're trying to, like, one-up one another, instead it would be like, okay, we're going to talk about this situation. Did you consider this? What about this idea? And that you collectively come and like build something together, right? And that like, oh, I have this perspective. Oh, interesting. I have that perspective, right? But it's so rarely the case that that actually happens. You do see it from time to time. Like when Richard Wolff and Michael Hudson get in conversation with one another. Those are interesting conversations. And they'll have like small divergences from one another, and they'll have different perspectives from one another because they're different people with different perspectives. But very rarely are they just I shouldn't say very rarely. They're never trying to dunk on one another because it's just pointless. And I just ugh, bleh, bleh. Isaac says you've been... Oh, I'm so sorry to hear you've been sick, Isaac. I got sick before Christmas, and I've had this persistent cough since. And I got to get myself to the doctor, just to walk-in clinic and just be like, I've had a persistent cough. And hopefully they just, like, take this needle and put it into your throat. And I'll be like, and then I'll suddenly be like, and I'll be like Popeye the Sailor Man. And I'll suddenly become big and beefy and strong. That'd be wonderful. To touch back on what Jason said here, like, you are absolutely right. Like, it is a divide and conquer strategy. And that, again, is, I think, why this whole TikTok red note moment is so scary for the power structure. That people are seeing through this stuff. They're beginning to see through the demographic splits, and they're beginning to see through the right-left dynamic that they've been put into. And the language that I keep hearing which I think is going to gain truck and become more serious, is it's not about left versus right or right versus left. It's about up versus down. That 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 visualization, that idea, that shift in perspective is something that I think is going to overtake the discourse. That it's not about left or right, it's about up or down. It's about looking at the owners of the society and looking at and looking at what they're doing and looking at the structure of the society that we live in, and asking ourselves very clearly, are we getting anything for this? Like, is this valuable? Is it good that we have these owners? Is it good that we have these bosses? Is it good that there are these people who are above us who seem to I shouldn't even say seem to, but who own everything, who hoard everything? Like, one of the big breakthrough moments that I've seen is people having conversations with Chinese citizens on this Red Note app and actually realizing, like, the Chinese are actually quite sympathetic to America and are quite concerned about Americans. And you have just conversations about how much the rent is, how much food people can take home. And people are beginning to recognize and realize, like, oh shit, like, we're getting fleeced here. Like, and all of the stories and everything that we're being told about China are just total bullshit. Yeah, Hull says class consciousness definitely has become a thing on TikTok. Can't allow that. The genie's out of the bottle, though. And I actually think by banning TikTok, they've done themselves a big disservice. That nothing has spread class consciousness faster than banning TikTok. Like, there's a school shooting and a mass shooting epidemic spread throughout America that's been going on for a decade. There's a fentanyl crisis that's been going on for a decade. There are wildfires that are taking out entire city blocks. That is a massive crisis. There's a climate change crisis going on in America. And the thing that the Congress is deciding to do is ban TikTok. Like, if that doesn't radicalize you, if that's not cracking open your consciousness a little bit, I don't know what to tell you, man. Like, I don't know what to tell you. I think you're living in La La Land. Like, and it shows how stupid these guys actually are. That they're sitting there actually being like, yeah, this is a wise decision. This is going to have good, positive results for us. This isn't going to spread resentment into the society. They're not going to do something like download a Chinese app called Red Note and I'll get on that instead of getting on Meta. Like, this is a sign of rebellion. People are rebelling, right? They're not actively picking up weapons and like shooting, but they're rebelling from the system. They didn't compliantly go over to Meta, right? They literally downloaded a Chinese app. Christopher Da Silva, good to see you, my man. Free Luigi. Let's go. Yeah, I have an article here. It's Bill Burr yells free Luigi on air while slamming insurance companies during LA wildfires. Look at the picture they chose for Luigi. Isn't that interesting? That they're using like the absolute worst picture they took of him when right after they tased him. Interesting. Peanut Butter Beatrice writes, I saw one Chinese person on Red Note ask if we Yanks really have to work 2 jobs to live. Yeah. Like, yeah. And I've been saying it over and over and over and over and over again. I'm sure you guys are sick of hearing me say it, but you're gonna, I guess that's why you're tuning in, to hear me say it. It's gonna get really obvious. It's gonna get really, really, really obvious. Like, American cities are crumbling and they're collapsing. Their infrastructure is collapsing. Their transit systems, such that they exist, are degrading. It's happening in front of people's eyes. Prices are soaring. Rent is soaring. Homelessness is soaring. And it's just going to get worse, and it's just going to get more and more obvious. Meanwhile, you flip over to Red Note. Cities look clean. People are talking about, oh, look how much food I can get for not a lot of money. Oh, my rent? I pay $500 a month for a 2-bedroom. Like, it's, but Joe says we're already there. I don't think we are. Like, I think it's obvious to you and me, Joe, because we're involved in this process of using a material dialectic in order to analyze the world around us. But I think there's a lot of people that are still sort of living in La La Land. And it's going to get even more obvious than this. Like, conservative neighborhoods are going to be flooded with tents and flooded with homeless people. Police forces are going to be overwhelmed. They're not going to know where to send their resources. They're not going to know what to do because there's just going to be so much of it. And Hull writes insane, and this is all man-induced. It's sick. Yeah. I mean, I think it's important to understand that it's not just man-induced. It's the system of capital. This is the conversation that they don't want citizens to have. They don't want citizens to actually say, it isn't just these people, right? It's not just these people. It's the entire structure of the system of capital that results in this. That what needs to happen is a complete teardown, a revolution, a teardown of this structure, a true analysis of this structure, and an absolute throttling of the systems that result in all of this. Like, we're not going to get anywhere as a people until the banks are fully nationalized. We're not going to get anywhere as a people until there is a true separation of finance and government. And that's not going to happen so long as the banks are privately held. Garden State, good to see you. JT writes, I am curious to see if citizens are going to be as willing to become cops, but I imagine there will be enough fools to line up for it. I mean, I think that there's just going to, like, there's not going to be that many jobs, right? There's just not going to be that many jobs. And I think that desperate people make desperate decisions. And to me, I do think that, like, so much of what's going on in America is wrapped up in white supremacy, but the poverty that is coming for America and the extremity of it, it's going to affect huge white populations. Like, it's just very, there comes a point where I'm like, how effective has the propaganda system been at distilling out just basic human empathy? Because there does kind of come a point where it's like, oh, we could help these people for like a big example of what I'm talking about. They're saying that the wildfires that went through LA, it's going to cost like $30 billion, right? It's going to cost us $30 billion to repair all the damage and to deal with that crisis. Oh, so like literally not even a fourth of Elon Musk's wealth. So if one guy decided to just pay for all of it, it would all just get paid for and it would be done. Oh. Okay. Right, but they don't. Like, they don't. Hall writes, I've learned that healthcare is monetized because they didn't want African Americans to get access to it. Yeah, that's part of the reason why single payer healthcare doesn't fly in America, because black people would also get it. Like, this this brutal system of white supremacy that exists in America and has existed in America for since its inception, since the beginning. Like, will we ever shake that? Can we ever shake that? Like, it's pretty doubtful, I think. Like, I think it's pretty doubtful that America and the people who live in America are actually going to come to a place where they go, oh, wait a minute. The color of your skin doesn't actually dictate who you are as a person or determine your value to reality. We should be creating universal systems that help everybody in a universal way, and put aside these sort of petty grievances. Just put aside this pettiness that we have for one another. Long Defiance says no social connection. Yeah, nothing connects us but the market. Commodity fetishism. Yeah, well, and you are a commodity, right? And everything. Have you noticed it? Have you noticed it? That every aspect of your life funnels through this commodity fetishism. Like, what do people say? What in the dating circle today? What's the phrase you keep hearing, right? What do you bring to the table? I want a high value partner, right? Like, these phrases really reveal a fetishization of us being commodified. That it's not about, being kind or generous or having a gentle spirit or being passionate about something. It's just being high value, which means being wealthy. That's really what it's about. Right? Yeah, what used to be a cultural connection is now an economic one, sexual market value. And I mean, it makes a type of sense to people, especially to people who have no what we might call class consciousness, but no like awareness of what the reality around them actually is. Right? Like, and to be fair, most people don't. Like, most people don't actually have like a big awareness of the economic straits of what's going on, even in their own neighborhood, even in their own situation, right? And I do think that the infusion of social media into people's lives has given them an inflated sense of an inflated expectation. That instead of adopting what is around them and seeing what's around them and understanding that, oh, what's around me is what's real, right? You see through this sort of digital medium what is possible, and that it is possible. There are people that are living this kind of life, but there's no understanding of how that is achieved. They just know that it is possible, and so that's where they set their expectation. They say, "Oh, this is what I want, and if that can't be delivered to me, then I don't want anything." And it's I do think it's I think it's something that's going to break. that time makes fools of us all. And we're on this sort of path where huge sections of the populace are going to be single, where there's going to be a huge population decline because nobody can afford to have children anymore. Oh yeah, South Korea. Henry has chimed in with capitalism is all we need, which is embarrassing. Like the system of capital is in a major decline currently. And Hull writes, current situation shows otherwise. Matter of fact, South Korea is a dystopia because of it. Yeah, South Korea, like they just passed legislation to make it legal to work 16-hour work days now. To me, it's the population decline that's the big red flashing light. Like if I'm the one who is in charge in South Korea, if I'm the leadership of South Korea, I'm looking at the shifting demographics that are coming, and I'm just like, huge flashing red light. Huge flashing red light. B, good to see you over on Twitch. Don't know if I said hello. Someone who can bring in the bacon. Yeah. Eggs D says, John, can you ban this paid troll already? You think he's a paid troll, eh? I mean, I don't know. It's good to be reminded. It's good to be reminded that there are people out there like that who are actually clinging on to this sort of delusion that capitalism is all we need. Embarrassing. It's just like looking at somebody who is like in the middle of it's just like looking at somebody who's in the middle of like the French Revolution, or like right at the beginning of the French Revolution, right? Defending the monarchy. That's what it's like. Nilo writes, I think he might be a paid troll too. He never changes his mind on anything. Yeah, I mean, no, I don't buy into that. I don't like. I would be convinced that he's a bot before I got convinced that he was a paid troll. I don't think that, like, intelligence services is not going to pay somebody to do this, right? They're just gonna get AI in here, right? Yeah, the system doesn't need to pay individuals to be like this. Yeah, JT, I think that's what it is, right? It's I know that it's tempting to follow the like the paid troll line, but it's much more pathetic, right? It's just much more pathetic. Like people are just like this, right? Which is just way worse. Like defending the system of capital for free. Blah. With like South Korea has 1,300 salary and house is very cheap. Like you can get a place for $450. Just like nonsense, right? Like, yeah, I'm sure that South Korea has like a $1,300 salary, but 16-hour work days. And like, what are you talking about? You get a place for $450. Yeah, it's why I say if you're gonna bootlick like this, at least get paid. Yeah, exactly. Nilo, yeah, somebody's running the bots. Yeah, good point. Long Defiance says they just want to waste your time. They fear you. I hope they do. Who's more dangerous than me, the Canadian commie, right? Nobody's more dangerous than the Canadian commie. Nilo writes, people are like this. I've seen it in person, but since I can't see you in person here, let there be the precautionary principle. Henry writes, should I be a capitalist and own the means of production? No, you should have a workers' co-op, right? And you should own the means of production along with the other workers who actually do the work, right? I mean, I do think that's true along defiant. Yeah, it's not funny. They fear any freedom. Like, this is, again, like I loop back around to this is why the current leadership and the current people who are in positions of power are so stupid, right? Like, the big discovery that what was called the New Deal Democrats came to, right, is that if you want people to continue forward on with this idea, the system of capital, like if you want to have capitalist owners owning the means of production with a underclass serving them, and that's the structure that you want to move forward with, well, then the underclass, the proletariat, needs a bit of a buy-in. It needs a buy-in. It needs to actually be have a certain degree of prosperity. And if that prosperity is stripped away, well, then the natural result is that the working class will revolt and riot and rebel and threaten revolution. That was the big lesson of the New Deal Democrats. That was Roosevelt, right? Who said that his greatest achievement was that he saved capitalism. Well, this new batch of capitalists have clearly not learned the lesson. They've clearly forgotten. They've clearly jettisoned that whole idea and that whole principle. And now they're just following the principle of mass consumption. Just more for me and nothing for anyone else. And that's the idea that we're following through. Henry, I just think you're too stupid to talk to. So don't pretend like you know anything about the subject, okay, bud? Like, I'm only keeping you around because you're embarrassing. Like, all you do is prove my point every time you open your mouth. Yeah, Joe, on the positive side, they're losing all credibility. Yeah. Hull writes, if a country got an uprising of incels, then you already know that said country is going in the wrong direction. Yeah, SK, the whole West. Henry says, that was a true question for you. No, it wasn't. It's just like a bad faith, stupid thing that a moronic capitalist says. Like, and you're too stupid to understand that. That's the thing, right? Like, you're too dumb to understand that that's not a good question. Right? Let's just read it. You want a society of cooperatives or a society of centralized planning state? Two different things. Tell me what you want, Yugoslavia or Soviet Union. Like, even if I cracked that open and tried to go into it with you, you're not that smart. You're not going to understand it. Right? So I'm just not going to bother. JT, Henry purposefully ignoring the entire stream of talking about China and how the West is undeniably folding inwards to make a point about Yugoslavia. It's myopic, reactionary gotcha stuff. Yep, exactly. Yeah, he just wants to waste your time. No, that's right. Because he's not smart, right? He's a very stupid person. And like, I think to him, I'm probably like a fascination, right? Like, he doesn't hear people talk the way I talk, right? And so he just keeps coming back because he's like, who is this person? What is this? Oh, I don't hear this anywhere else. Does he understand that capitalism is actually good? I have these reactionary views that I've never once challenged in my life. But I think we've finally done it. It's when he starts talking like he actually knows anything about the subject, when he's actually an illiterate moron. Like, it was fine when he was just kind of like a bot, right? But nothing pisses me off than stupid people who think they're smart. Like, that's what is that? That's rule 3, right? Rule 1 is no Nazis. We get rid of those people right away. Rule 2 is don't be rude, right? So if you insult me, right, you're gone. And then rule 3 is like, if you're not capable of actually absorbing information. Like, if I actually do have a conversation with you and then it becomes very obvious that you're just not capable of absorbing that information, i.e. you're too stupid to talk to, you're gone. And I think Henry just crossed the threshold for me. He's just too stupid to talk to, right? Yeah, Henry is implying the argument hinges on that. It's chasing vapors of reactionary arguments baked in, not questioning anything in reality. Yeah. And like no attempt to learn at all. Like just not actually interested in learning anything about the subject, right? Again, just too stupid to talk to. Nilo writes, I feel like it's getting to the point where Marxists actually have a different dialect compared to other people. Not quite, but almost. Look, all Marxism is at its very basic core, right? And I keep saying it over and over and over again. At the rawest of the nougat of what Marxism is look at evidence, look at history, draw conclusions from that. That's all it is. And there is like most Western Marxists erect an ideology from the works of Marx. And they manage to do so because they strip out of their analysis. This is exactly what I was talking about with the Trotskyists, right? They strip out of their analysis the very basic raw nougat of reality exists. And that this is about observing reality and observing history, right? It's not about maintaining your prejudices and trying to apply your prejudices. It's not about having your biases against something and then finding a way to reaffirm those biases. It's not about taking a snapshot of a place and applying it to an ideology you drew out of a philosopher you liked, like Marx. Right? It's about looking at those people, looking at what is going on, looking at the evidence and looking at the history, and drawing conclusions from that. Like, that's what it is. And that's the reason why Marxism will continue to persist. And why, as a social science, it will never actually go away. Because I think the natural inclination, like, I know this was true of me, and I've heard a similar thing talked about by Michael Parenti. Like, he would talk about an idea, and I have had this in my life as well, where I would talk about an idea, and I'd be like, well, we should do this very reasonable, rational thing, and what people would say to me is, but that's communism. Oh, have you read Karl Marx? That sounds like a Marx idea. And I'd be like, who's Karl Marx? And that's like the position I was in for most of my life, right? And like, finally you read him and you're like, oh yeah, this guy had it right. Like he knew it was up. He understood it. Because fundamentally, it starts with the idea that this is a material reality and people's material conditions are the most important thing. What their environment is doing, right? Yeah, it's a methodology, not a worldview. That's right. And by and I think people, and that to me is what separates Marxism and why it will continue to persist, because there will always be people who are like, shouldn't we care about reality? Like, shouldn't we care about what's going on in reality? And shouldn't reality be the primary driver of our decision making? We shouldn't fall for just like an ideology over and over and over again. And let's put this one up. This is fun. Simply Steve says, we are now the kingdom of America. Kings rule kingdoms, not elected leaders. Generational reality schmeality, exactly. Hull asks, tribes operate in communism, right? So tribalism is tough, right? It's a tough thing to break out of. Humans are very tribalistic. We break ourselves into tribes. And you can see that happening on the internet, Like there's a real tribal mode that happens, and that tribal mode, um, I don't know that humans like this is sort of the big question mark, right? Of like how do humans organize large scale, like complex societies that don't fall into tribalism? We here in America have obviously not succeeded at that. The word that communists use to try to avoid it is factionalism, right? We try to avoid factionalism. So of course, yeah, tribes operate in communism. Sure, that definitely can happen. It's not great because once societies start to fall into tribalism and fall into superstition, it's very difficult to come out of it. And I don't think that like a communist society would be immune to it. You'd probably be more aware of it, but immune, probably not. Because there are like, as much as I try to decry the idea of, I feel like human nature gets used as sort of a scapegoat for a lot of things, right? It's like the capitalists will say, "Oh, you can't get rid of capitalism; it's human nature," as if things like compassion and love and empathy are not also a part of human nature. But I do think there are certain things that is built into the human experience that we should be more aware of. And a big one to me is that it is perfectly normal and perfectly natural and built in to the human experience that a newborn child will give deference first to its parents, then to its tribe. And that it takes education and effort for an individual to go beyond that deference to their family, then tribe, and then nation. Right? That this whole process that I'm describing, I think the word that we use to describe it is nationalism. That people come into reality as nationalists, first and foremost. We have this sort of pledged loyalty to our family, then our tribe, then our and our communities and our nation, and that's just immediately ingrained. And then of course it's reinforced through our systems, through our education systems, indoctrination systems, through our propaganda. And so it's common. And it takes a great deal of effort and force and will and intention for a person to step out of that nationalistic worldview and realize, oh, wait, like, just because I was born in Manitoba doesn't make Manitoba the greatest thing that exists. Hull says, caught you off guard with that question, didn't I? No, I've been asked that question before. And I think it's a good question to talk about because, and I think it's important for us to all be aware that we are nationalists first. We are. Like, that's where we start. That's where we begin. And that many of us, especially on the left, begin to break out of that because we experience betrayal. And the system of capital is a system that betrays. It betrays people. And so once you are betrayed by the system of capital, you begin to try to find alternative paths. I also think one of the best ways to destroy nationalism is to get people to travel. Getting people to travel really makes you, it breaks down the fear of the other. It breaks down the fear of the other. Like, you take a look at what's going on with this Red Note situation. Exactly. Rachel, thank you. Good to see you, Rachel. I feel connected to a new tribe now. Love the little red book, right? This whole situation going on. Well, you have huge sections of the American populace now are just like talking to Chinese people, right? It's a form of travel. They're being transported to a new place, right? And it's breaking apart the fear-based thinking that's required for nationalism to thrive in its worst forms. That the fear of the other, the fear of that the demonization. Oh, look how good we've got it. They've got it so much worse over there. That kind of rationale, that kind of thinking. Well, it's starting to break apart, and it's breaking apart because people are traveling there through a digital format, but traveling there all the same. And so the reason why I think it's important for us to be aware of this is that I do think societies that are trying to be communistic or socialist are just as likely to fall prey to this type of thinking, this type of superiority thinking, this type of supremacy thinking that can develop because of the natural state of humanity, which is first and foremost tribal and nationalistic. That it's something we have to overcome. And the only way to overcome it is through society. Wick, any luck finding the new camera? Cheers, buddy. Love you. Wick, with another donation, $13.99. Thank you so much, bud. Dude, I got to get my ass in gear. You're absolutely right. I tried to buy it one time and had just a kerfuffle, and it got me so demoralized. And now it's just laziness. It's nothing but I'm on vacation is the thing, right? I'm not at work right now, so I'm just like falling asleep instead of doing the live stream, that kind of thing. Thank you for the donation, Wick. I really do appreciate it, bud. And I'll get my ass in gear about that for sure. I will. Ugh. Generation Y me, good to see you. John, good to see you. Without tribes, what would humans cling to for solace? I mean, John, I think I feel like you're stumbling into a very big question. You don't realize you're doing it. Because it's funny, like, I do consider myself a communist, and part of sort of the communist idea, right? And Marx talked about it, and many communists have talked about it, is the idea of like a secular state. And so atheism is pretty common amongst in communist circles. Most communists, I think, are atheist. I am not. I don't consider myself an atheist. I consider myself, and I don't even consider myself agnostic. I consider myself a theist. That I think that we're living in a living universe, and an organism that is alive, that we are akin to it in the same way that a red blood cell is akin to us. That the system that we are part of is so outside of our scope of understanding that we could not possibly, under any circumstances, grasp the fullness of it. In the same way that a red blood cell could never understand what a car payment is. Like, that's the relationship that we have with the body that we exist in. And that body is the universe itself. That we are alive and conscious, and so too is it alive and conscious. And that we, as we come into our consciousness of ourselves and of our surroundings and of our community and of our reality, so too does reality and the universe come into a consciousness of itself, and that we have a collective consciousness, and that there is a collective nature to that consciousness. And so when it comes to taking solace with the plight that we are in, And it is a plight. I mean, that can't be denied. That we are born in a random location that we don't choose. We deal with the circumstances that we are born into. We grow old and then we die, right? And the whole thing seems a little bit pointless. Well, the solace that I do take, uh, uh, the solace that I do take in all of this is that uh, uh, I am part of a grander and larger system, a system that's larger than myself by its very definition. And that the process of me going through this experience is the process of my creator going through the experience of creation. And that when I pass on, just as a music note is played and then is no longer heard, I will be part of this larger symphony. And it just so happens to be that I'm in a cacophonous moment within the symphony. And so I take solace in that. I take solace in the idea that this is just an unfolding creative process that I have the absolute privilege of being a part of. And that my part of it, while it might be small and while it might be quiet, I think is as valuable as anybody else's part of it. That some people are big, bold, long, whole notes, and some people are tiny little staccatos. Some people are rests. And we all make it all up together. And the music that we collectively play, or the mural that we create, or the mosaic that we're creating, is itself alive. And that we are the process of creation discovering itself. And it's difficult to hold on to that. It's difficult to remind myself of that. It's easy to get caught in the mundanity and the tiny scale of things. Oh, Wick, with another donation, $27.99. We all need a break sometimes. Anything worth having is worth fighting for. Don't give up. I've been here since 2021 with you. We're all part of the same energy. Oh, talk about the shift to favoring Doug Ford now. Yeah, I'm not favoring Doug Ford for sure. But there are big, like, the enemy of my enemy is my friend kind of vibes happening right now in Ontario for sure. Canada is not for sale. Really hilarious because he, like, ran on a platform of Ontario open for business. Hall writes, well, welcoming foreigners used to be common practice in ancient civilizations like bathing, sharing concubines. Oh, well. Long Defiant. I believe that smaller focus on building an integrated local leftist community is key. Taking over nations will just reproduce the hierarchy and perpetuate abuse. I tend to, well, honestly, I think it's just too late. Like, the decline is happening. And so I don't think we have an alternative. Like, I think you're right that it's just the smaller focus of building smaller, like, mutual aid networks. And we're just not, I just don't think we have an alternative. It's like that or nothing, essentially. JT writes, I take solace in my cats. 100%. How very Egyptian of you. They got you, eh? They got you with their worms or whatever it is they get inside of you. Rachel writes, would you call it a substance around a Spinoza? Spinoza is something that I did some research on Spinoza maybe 15 years ago because I was talking this way and people were like, this sounds like Spinoza. And I seem to recall that it wasn't inaccurate. I didn't get married to it, but I seem to remember reading it and being like, yeah. John continues, John, I'm an atheist with think tank experience. Presume I am aware of the ramifications of my notes. Okay. I don't really know what that means, but okay. Nilo writes, I think the problem with this line of thinking is when you ask yourself, if the universe is a body, what is that body in? What is outside that body? Yeah, like we can't know. Like that's sort of what infuriates the curious, is that I think that is territory we are simply not allowed to tread. Just simply like how you could never explain to a red blood cell what paying rent is. It's just an utterly foreign concept. And there are so many concepts that you would need to explain and describe to that red blood cell before you even got to the point of describing like what's a car payment, what's a job. Like it's just so outside of its perceived reality and the information that it has access to. And if it attempted to step into that reality, it would be obliterated instantaneously, like going through a black hole. I just and so I do think that we are constrained within the confines of this reality, and we will never, ever, 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 ever get out of that. And that's just how it is. That the rules that exist outside of this universe are utterly foreign to us and always will be. Simply based on like very tautological thinking. Like, we can't be nothing. We must exist. That the concept of nothing is foreign to us. We don't know what that is. Like we have kind of a concept of it, but we don't really get it. We don't understand nothing. And so nothingness and and because it's so foreign to us and because we don't have a comprehension of it, like we can't even possibly begin to even contemplate or theorize about it. It's just nothing. How does that work? But even in that phrase, like, how does that work? Well, it doesn't work because it's nothing. And so it's just one of those things where it's like you just have to accept that one's going to elude you. Just in the same way as a red blood cell will never know what a car payment is. It'll never know what a deer is. It'll never have an understanding of like a skyscraper. It just won't understand that. Rachel writes, universe means one song. Yep. One verse from the mouth of God. Long Defiant, how can leftists build economic power? I think that you've nailed it before, my man. I think that you hit it before. Big shout out again to Wick Sounds today. Thank you for the donations, bud. I really do appreciate it. I'm so grateful that things are going so well for you in your life that you feel you can donate. I'm so happy that things have happened for you, my man. That's so wonderful, and I'm grateful that you feel the need to share with me. And I'm happy that I have somehow touched your life in a way that you feel that that's something you've got to do. So thank you, Wix. I do appreciate it, my man. I got to get off my ass and get this camera, my man. Long Defiant asks, how can leftists build economic power? I think you've hit it, dude. It is just about building social networks. Like, it's about it is about finding a way to get connected to mutual aid networks that are detached from sort of this corporate system. Like, we are essentially just one big corporation, right? We are essentially just one big corporate structure. And we've got to find ways to break out of that corporate structure as best as we can. And it's not going to be clean, and it's not going to be easy. And I'm hoping that we'll get a whole generation of people, of entrepreneurs, who will say, I'm going to start a business and it's going to be a worker co-op, and we're going to be involved in it. Hull says, when you're constantly bombarded with ideologies, it's difficult for the human race to ascend. Oh yeah, like, we're in a real cacophony right now. We're in a real cacophonous moment where it's difficult for, like, a big reason why I think there's so much fundamentalism right now, especially amongst the kind of traditional religions like Islam and Judaism and Christianity. I think a big reason why there's so much fundamentalism, and not exclusively those religions, but those are sort of the big ones. The reason why there's so much fundamentalism right now is because there's so much information flying around now. And so people are really clutching it. And people don't want it to mold and shift and change and amalgamate. And I think people feel like they're losing it. Right? That there are people, I think Christians feel like there's value here. There's value in this biblical text. We have this historical document, and it is a historical document, right? Like maybe it's not telling you the, like, scientific, literal truth of things, but it is a document that has historical weight. And that's more or less how I think that document should be approached. And that I think that the Christians are deeply concerned that with all this information going around and all this, like, that Christianity is going to get lost. And so the response, I think, to that sensation is to clutch it even closer, clutch it even harder, and to double down, right? Double down on it. And be like, no, this is the absolute, firm, true word of God himself. Right? As opposed to what this actually is, which is a series of stories written on the theme of God, tied in to a historical culture. So there's just, like, this constant building on each iteration. There's this iterating thing that happens, which I think is common for cultures to do. I don't think that that's an uncommon thing to see. And you can learn, like, one of the big things that I think is so important, like, what's frustrating is when people read the Bible and they'll read, like, Exodus, or they'll read, like, Deuteronomy, and they'll see the laws that exist. And they'll be like, what a horrible culture. What a backward, like, all this kind of stuff. Because there are people today that are saying we should use the Bible as our legal system, which is just a doubling down of the most absurd order. Even the people that wrote the New Testament wouldn't say that, right? And so, of course, there's this, like, revulsion of, like, oh, you want this to be the highest form of your morality, but there's, like, slavery in it and all this kind of stuff. As opposed to how it should be read, which is as a document that evolved with the people that were writing it. That every single iteration, yes, these laws were barbaric. You should have seen what they were doing before. Yeah, that's bad, but look at that. Oh, you thought that was bad? Look at that. And that, oh, actually, as we go along, things actually improve, and there's an opening up, and then that process of opening up is actually happening as time moves forward. That the Old Testament God is about condemnation and judgment and fire and fury, and the New Testament God is about opening and love, and that things shift and things change, and there comes to be a deeper understanding of what it means to actually be alive and what it means to be a human, and what's the purpose of this existence, and how should we exist, and how should we perceive one another, and how do we deal with one another. And I think the fundamentalists have done themselves a big disservice by saying the book of Exodus should be followed. What are you talking about? Like, nobody thinks that. Nobody thinks that should be the case. That's crazy. Like, that's good for a desertist people that were living 6,000, 4,000, 2,000 years ago. Okay, cool. But, like, even they were changing and adjusting and shifting their rules and their laws. And the big lesson should be like, oh, look where humanity was. Look where we are now. We have a trajectory here, don't we? We don't want to go back there. And we know what humans are capable of. And so we should do what we can to avoid it. And so, because I think everybody's clutching as hard as they possibly can, like, what's the line that I always use about fundamentalists is that they're clutching their Bible so hard that they can't be bothered to open it to read it. Like, I don't think that many of these guys are actually reading their book. Because I think if they actually read it, and not as if it's like literal, the magic is literally magic true, right? Like that's what makes it crazy. And it's so difficult for me to remember that I used to think this way. I used to be a fundamentalist Christian. I used to think that the magic was real, that back 2,000 years ago there was a wizard walking around actually casting spells. It's just kind of bonkers to think about, right? Like, whereas very clearly what was going on is that, yeah, at anytime anybody's casting a spell in these books, it's connecting it to a previous story that the listener has already heard once before. It's or it's opening up a cultural idea, right? Anytime that there's magic, the listener and the viewer is supposed to immediately understand, oh, we're in like the meta. We're in this meta historical kind of thing. Right? Like we've elevated ourselves from the mundane into this larger story and this larger picture. And how do I know that's true? Because there's magic. There's a guy casting spells. Right? And the type of spells that they're casting and the type of magic that they're using gives you an idea of the type of story that this is and the type of individual that this person is. Right? Like, Christ wasn't the first person to turn water into wine. He wasn't the first guy to die and come back. Right? And the idea that we, like, it's sort of odd that we've lost that. That, like, we're literally standing here being like, I'd love to, if somebody gave me, like, $1 billion and just said, okay, John, you have to make a movie, $1 billion budget. I'd be like, okay, cool. I would make a movie that was about a person living in a universe where everybody genuinely believed that the Harry Potter story was factually true. Everybody walking around believed that there was a hidden secret wizard society that existed behind the walls of wherever they were. And just right around the corner was a cabal of sorcerers and wizards that you could never be a part of. And that Voldemort was a real person and a real thing. And this person being born into the society where everybody actually believed that Harry Potter happened. It's a real event. That magic is real. You're just a muggle. And the steady, slow realization of one person in that society coming to terms with the reality that this is just a book. Like, this is just a children's book that was written for fun. These movies are not documentaries. They're just, the magic isn't real. We just like magic because magic is what elevates. Nothing elevates an individual into a place of meta thinking and abstract thought faster than magic. The moment your story has magic in it, people are instantly just like abstract, meta. Even if the story is simple, doesn't really have much of in terms of like a larger meaning, just straight up good versus evil stuff, people are still like entranced and whisked away and taken hold by it because it has magic in it. And so by putting magic into your stories, you're instantly having a spiritual or religious, or at the very least an abstract conversation with the viewer, because the viewer intrinsically understands that what they're seeing isn't real, but it is real in a sense, in that in that mystical, magical, emotional way, and that we all exist in this sort of physical mundane form, but also in this abstract magical form as well. And so I feel like that's what the people who are clinging hold, the fundamentalists, are missing. They're missing, and that's why the stories that they tell today suck, and why they're terrible storytellers, because they genuinely are convinced that this is a real thing that happened. And it's like, bro, no, like it's actually exactly the opposite. And that everybody, even like the people listening during the day, like nobody believed that Jesus Christ was a wizard that actually died and came back. Like everybody understood that it was a story that had magic in it, and that magic is where the meaning lived. That the meaning exists within the magic, and that it's like a code that like Christ didn't literally die and literally resurrect and literally ascend to heaven. It's very clearly a storyteller being like, this was a man whose message we should follow. He was killed by the state, but then he came back and ascended to heaven. So the state could not kill his message, even if they killed the man. Like, that's an extremely powerful statement. It's an extremely powerful statement. And then the Christians will do things like, well, if Christ didn't literally die and resurrect, then why did all of his disciples sacrifice themselves and martyr themselves? It's like, because they too believed in the message of Christ. Because they too believed that the state had lost its mind and had gone off the rails, was crucifying people in public. And they believed in the idea that humanity could live in peace with itself. And they were willing to die for that cause, just like their Christ commanded in the story that had magic in it, bro. So I do think that if humanity is ever to, I don't know about ascension, but if it's ever to come to a place of peace, come to terms with itself, and even begin the process of attempting to find some idea of ascension, it'll happen because we'll all recognize and realize and see ourselves in one another. That you and I are of the same body, and we exist within the same structure, and we exist together, and we live together, and we die together. And when we go to the same place, whatever that is. And that the harm I do to you is the harm I do to myself. And the harm you do to me is the harm you do to yourself. And the faster we get to there, to realize that this impulse we have to do harm to things we don't know anything about, or to people we don't know anything about, it would be like your liver cutting itself off from your heart. How long do you think the body survives that way? Generation YME says, I think we got to get over this politicians wearing hats thing. Like, use your words, not hats. Strong point, Generation YME. Strong point. I'm down with hats. John Hallenberg, Recommunism. I think it has the most potential as an organizing principle, but I also think that humans as a whole are too combative to maintain peaceful communes on a large scale. I mean, the biggest issue that communism has ever faced has always been the external threat of finance capital, right? That the real issue that we're really facing today is this structure of finance capital, which organizes itself to be imperial. It wants to invade as many nations as it can, to open up as many markets as it can, in order to expand an ever-growing profit margin, right? So it's very difficult to organize large-scale communist ideas while simultaneously fighting against this dramatic and serious existential external threat of finance capital. And I think the Chinese are doing a good job of it. We'll see if they get corrupted by it, which is completely possible. Although all the signs show me that they're very aware that that corruption exists, and they're doing everything they can to get rid of it. But I tend to disagree. I think that humanity can do it, and that we can have more serious conversations, and we can have, like, right now we're in a moment of extreme existential constipation. All of our thinking and all of our ideas and everything we say gets funneled through this very tiny, itsy bitsy little gap, right, called the capitalist class. And it doesn't matter how good your idea is, or how interesting your idea is, or how thoughtful it is, or how well thought out it is, or anything. If the capitalists don't want it, then it won't go through. That's created a deeply constipated society. And should this little tiny bottleneck be broken open or removed, and the human spirit and human thought is able to flow freely, and ideas are able to flow freely, and finance, the material conditions to actually build, are able to flow freely, I think it could unleash some very, very powerful forces, very positive, powerful forces that that I think kind of belie this idea. We're too used to living in an exploitive model, an exploitive structure, that we can't even perceive or believe what it would be like to live outside of it. But there are those of us that can believe it, and there are those of us that can see it, because the truth of it is so apparent. It's so simple to see for many. Like, we live in abundance, right? Scarcity is gone. We don't live in scarcity. We actually are living in overabundance. And so the old arguments of scarcity are gone and dead. And now it is just organization. It is just the politics, which is why the capitalists have turned it into an ideological struggle, because that's all they have left. Because if it was just about how to organize this practically, the very first thing that anybody would do is be like, hey, this dumb bottleneck that doesn't need to exist, be rid of it. Who cares about that? Be gone. Nilo writes, because we can't know, that's why I think agnosticism makes the most sense. I think part of the reason why I don't land on agnosticism and I have connected into just theism is because of my artistic background. That creating music and creating art gets you, or gets me, in touch closer to the creator. People will ask the question, like, how do you come up with your music? How do you come up with your ideas? Like, how do you come up with this stuff? And the answer is, I don't. That's the truth. I don't. Right? That I'm just an antenna and I receive it. That's all. And sometimes you receive it and it's inconvenient. And sometimes you receive it and it sucks. And sometimes you receive it and it's okay, and you can sort of crush it and malleate it and make it something better. And then sometimes you receive it and it's fucking brilliant. And it's just... And so because of that process, and like, I think that anybody that stood in front of a group of people and received their adulation understands there's a larger flow. There's a larger flow. And so I don't find agnosticism to be particularly convincing. Because agnosticism essentially says to me, hey, John, you know all that lived experience you have? Just take that and put that aside. It's like, I don't think I can. I don't think I can. Oh, unanswered questions. I don't know if I've ever even seen you here. In the West, we have a very suspicious view of miracles, but in the East, gurus performing miracles is just considered another Wednesday. Jesus was another guru preaching a familiar message. I mean, I don't necessarily buy into the idea. It's very believable to me to think that most of what Christ did or said was probably just attributed to him. I can believe that. That's fine. Because I think that that story captures the moment in time of the Roman Empire. Like, if you ask me, the most powerful story that had to be circulating during that period of time had to be Spartacus. I don't know how, like, everybody would have to have known about Spartacus. And the crucifixion of 10,000 men, that's insanity. Crucifixion is like a cultural touchstone for people, for sure. And so I think the story of Christ really embodies that and takes on that zeitgeist. That people understand that the state crucifies good people for fighting for what's right. Jason writes, developing a method of disseminating information from an objective, multidimensional perspective, getting past confirmation bias, reconnecting with nature and each other outside of this format. That's a real good way of putting that, my man. Like, I just try to get outside myself and get above my own concerns for myself and the concerns of my neighborhood and try to see things in a more objective way. Like, I try to put myself in the other person's shoes. And I try to see the world through their eyes. That it's just not satisfying for me to be like, oh, the Ruskies attacked Ukraine and Putin is the next Hitler. It's like, okay, let's put ourselves in Putin's position. What was happening? Let's put ourselves in the position of the average Russian citizen. What was happening? What's their world like? Let's try to see what was going on. Let's try to see how do they think about the world and how do they perceive what's happening around them. Right? And I think that's, frankly, it's just more interesting. Like, I don't know why people stick with this kind of hyper-nationalistic worldview. It's very boring. Like, it really is. Like, you're just, like, it's reactionary. It's just as knee-jerky as possible. There's just nothing to it. I guess it's just easier. And in a way, I guess I'm kind of jealous of it because it does mean that you can just be like, ah, and then move on with your life. Right? You don't need to think about it. Because it's just like, Putin, next Hitler, moving on. Oh, Putin's the next Hitler. Okay, when's the draft? Oh, it's not happening? Oh. Long Defiant writes, it seems to me that when we are an employee, we are strengthening a capitalist, and when we consume products, we are strengthening capitalists. Yeah, we have to get out of the loop. Yeah. We have to seize the means of production, grow our own food, get connected to non-capitalist loops. It's the best we've got. And I know it's not going to be easy, right? This system of capital has been going on for a long time. Rachel Graham says, that's what they call us on Redbook, a corporation masquerading as a civilization. Yeah, I think that's accurate. Like, I've said it before here in Canada, right? That we were created by a fur trading company, a fur trading corporation, and a monarch. And the monarch's dead and the corporation's bankrupt. Wick writes, John, I'm glad to help. If I had a lot more, I would give you a lot more. My good man, you deserve it. Think solidarity and add a $sign. Well, that's very kind of you, Wick. You're being very kind to me, my man. I do appreciate it. Jason writes, people need a wider knowledge base and a more fulfilling personal experiences to base their opinions on, ultimately, to get us on the same page regarding our worldview and means of effecting change. I mean, what we really need to do is come to a consensus about our primary concerns, or like our first principles. Like, that's really where we're hurting. And it is starting to sharpen, right? But like, you think about like the libertarian kind of moment that we're going through, like there's a major divergence in first principles between the modern libertarian movement and communists. Right? Communists are like, people should have access to food and shelter, that should be easy. And libertarians are like, no, life should be about suffering. You should have to earn that. That's a major divergence that I don't think you can reconcile. Right? Like, how do you reconcile people should have food versus people should starve? Right? People should have to justify their access to food, even as we throw that food away. And so, to me, it is about confronting each other on first principles and not getting too lost on the margins. And to me, first principles, people should have access to food and shelter. If you can't agree on that, you're going nowhere. Hall writes, do people even realize that shrooms have been a thing for millennials? Like, people of the ancient days would get high and probably write down shit. Yeah. Unanswered questions writes, different gods. In the Nag Hammadi texts, Jesus is very much preaching an Eastern style philosophy wherein you are God. You just need to realize it. The Orthodox Christianity of today is an abomination. I mean, I do think that that existed in the original sort of teachings. I think, like, part of the as Christianity went on, like the Bible itself is a collection of texts that were selected by powerful people, right? But if you actually read Jesus, like the whole theology behind Jesus is that, okay, Jesus is the Son of God, right? Jesus comes down, he's the Son of God, and he embodies all of the qualities of God. Well, this kind of begs a question, doesn't it? Which is, oh, so if Jesus is the Son of God, am I the Son of God? Are you a son or daughter of God? What makes Jesus so special? How come I'm excluded? I was created by God. Can I be the Son of God too? And I think that's a conclusion that powerful people don't want the regular people to kind of come to terms with and realize, right? They don't want average citizens to raise their expectations to the point where they're like, hold on, wait a minute. If I'm the creative force of God, then I should be treated with dignity and respect. No, I'm not going to waste my life away so that you can sit on your ass and eat food all day. I think that's a problem, right? I think it's a problem for powerful people. They want compliant workers. They want quiet slaves. That's what it's about. It's what it's always been about. And so expunging from the texts and expunging from, and you can see it in like the Gnostic Gospels, for example, right? Expunging from a lot of this stuff, anything that connects people to the idea that they might also be divine figures or quantum beings, as Scrail has written. I think it's important for powerful people to do that. Right? It's hardly surprising that one of the most powerful Christian doctrines today is if you're rich, it's because God has blessed you, and if you're poor, it's because you've done something to offend God. Jason writes, yes, understanding consciousness is fundamentally vital. As is spirituality, they go hand in hand. Get out of this left-right, blue-red mentality. Egyptians are more important than you realize. Rachel Graham, you can lock up Luigi, but you can't kill his message. That's right. Generation Y me, I'm too tired after work now to be funny in chat, if I ever was funny. I don't know, dude. I'm finding you to be quite delightful. Hull says, being assholes is by choice. Tribalism is part of nature, but being unprovokedly an ass is our downfall, aka bullying, which is not taken seriously from schools. I mean, we do tend to empower it, don't we? How do you deal with a bully without bullying them? I think there's something of a paradox there. No, people teach you how to treat them. I don't think there's a paradox there at all. Somebody asked, we're getting to the end of this here. Somebody said something that I caught and I want to... John writes, your answer implies that dominant personalities might evolve into unselfish creatures. Hard to fathom such a dynamic. The reason, John, why I hold that position so strongly is because that's basically what happened to me. Like, I went from being a nationalistic fundamentalist Christian to this, to what you see now, to a internationally minded communist, or to a globally minded communist, right? And the idea of exploiting another person for my own benefit is just not something I'm going to engage in, because I see it as harmful in a primary sense. That it's why I can't be a boss, right? I can't be an owner. I can't do it, because I don't think could sleep at night. I don't think I could deal with that. And so, of course, it's possible. And I know it's possible because here I am. And the question we should be asking is how do we get more of it? How do we get more? How do we get more people out of nationalism? How do we get more people out of these systems of fundamentalist thought? How do we get more? How do we do it faster? Because I think it's normal, but I think that we could do a better job of it. Rachel asked, John, are you beekeeping now? Beekeeping will start in May. I have all the gear. I have everything. I'm all set up. I'm ready to go. I just need the bees. And those will be ready in May. Zed says, you just want to take our porn? I would never consider doing that to you, Zed. Never. What the hell are you guys talking about? All right, whatever. Okay, we've reached the end of this one. My voice is starting to go. I can feel it. Always remember, guys, each and every one of you is a quantum being, walking around in quantum energy. These billionaires are spending hundreds of billions of dollars in the hopes you'll never realize it. You'll just stay the good little commodity they need you to be. Rebel. Revolt. Repent. Good luck. We're going to need it.